Here at the Still 80 Mania podcast, we are passionate about drifting history. Here's a little history lesson. Back in 2003, Falken Tires did what no other tire company in the US did. They promoted drifting by sponsoring Falken Drift Show-Off, and they brought legendary Japanese drifters Koguchi and Seigo Yamamoto to judge and do demos. They sponsored grassroots drivers, and when FD was established, they supported the series and drivers for 19 years. When we approached Falken about partnering with us, they were happy to come on board because they care about drifting culture, and they support our mission to document drifting both past and present. Thank you, Falken Tires, for playing an important role in drifting around the world and for making Season 2 our best season yet. For more information, please visit Falken Tires' website at falkentire.com and check out their IG at Falken Tire. You're listening to the Still 80 Mania podcast Season 2, brought to you by Falken Tires. Here we document the history of drifting by interviewing the OGs and trendsetters of drifting culture. You're listening to another episode of the Still 80 Mania podcast. I'm your host, Benson Sue. I got my co-host and co-producer, Nadine. Hey, babe.
Hey, honey buns.
And I got my audio-video engineer, Mark Mondoy. What's up, Mark?
What up, everybody?
We got a good episode for you today. He is a real OG. He may be one of the OGest of all of our guests so far. He goes way back to the 90s of the import racing scene out here in SoCal. He is an editor, or was an editor of famed magazines like Turbo Magazine and Import Tuner. And he was a builder and fabricator of many iconic drag racing cars and drifting cars in the US. So without further ado, Gary, what's up? Welcome to the podcast, man.
Woo!
I feel like I should be walking on water right now.
Yeah.
Welcome, Mr. Castillo. Oh my god.
What's good? How you doing, man?
Not bad. It was a long drive up, but
yeah, thank you for making it
good.
out here. We're supposed to have a hurricane later this evening, so
Yeah.
thanks for braving it out here.
Yeah. That was, I don't know. I thought it was supposed to start earlier, but
Yeah.
we're lucky.
Yeah. No,
I
we're
told
good.
it to hold off till we finish recording.
Yeah.
So, all
Yeah.
good.
Well, if this podcast like suddenly finishes, you know why.
Yeah. When you start hearing the rain on the roof.
Right. Hear the cursing and be like, let's get the F out of here.
My car, save my car.
Yes. Put the S13 back inside.
Oh my god. Oh.
So, Gary, we're going to get into the history of all that. But before we get there, a question we ask is, like, when did you fall in love with drifting? We ask that a lot. But since you're not really like primarily a driver, you're more of a behind the scenes guy. Like, did you fall in love with drifting? Are you in love with drifting?
I would say, yes, I am in love with drifting.
Okay.
And,
tell us about it. Like, when did that moment happen for you?
Well, I mean, it was driving, obviously.
Yeah.
So, like, I
remember you driving at Drift Day with us a few times.
Yep. That's exactly what it was. So it was Drift Day.
Okay.
But I do enjoy driving, but I know my place on a car. And
Yeah.
It's not in the driver's seat.
Yeah.
It's under the car.
Okay.
But at the same time, it's, you got to enjoy both of them.
Yeah.
To really figure it out. But I would probably say the start of it was, well, the one big thing that got me into drifting was my buddies Len Higa and Jensen Oda.
Yeah.
Like, they were from Hawaii, so drifting was huge in Hawaii.
Yeah.
But they got into it, and I was this drag race guy, and at the time I was still writing for the magazines.
Yeah.
And when they got into it, I was just the car guy. I was like, I don't care what kind of racing it is. Like, it could have tires, it could have wings, it can have a propeller or whatever it is. Like, I'm just into it. And then they got into it, and we were really, really close from our drag racing days. But I would probably say that when they started getting into it, I just wanted to figure it out.
Yeah.
So it came down to where, what are you guys doing? It's like, this thing called steering angle. I'm like, well, yeah, I can figure that thing out. And then they just kept playing with their cars. And then from there, it went from playing with their cars to where, all right, we're going to go to Drift Day. And it was like, I mean, it was low single digit drift days. Like
Yeah,
when
it
we
was
were
one of
going,
the early
yeah.
ones. It was so early. It was at Irwindale parking lot.
Yeah, that's exactly what
Yeah,
it
it was
was.
before we went to Fontana.
Oh, yeah.
It was before we ever did anything on the infield.
I want to say it was exactly. It was before they did any drifting
Yeah.
in the track.
Yeah.
It was only the parking lot, and
Yeah.
that was it. And so I remember going to those, and I'm like, oh, well, that's crazy. Like, it's just literally sideways the whole time,
Yeah.
and, you're not trying to go straight. And kept playing with their cars. Len had a S14, and then Judson had a Corolla, but I think he ended up going through a couple cars.
Okay.
And sorry, I gotta burp.
It's all good. We got some pre-gaming happening before the interview. It's all good.
So then it was just really hanging out with them and then going to the drift days.
Yeah.
And then at that time, that was when, like, if you had the Drift Day 1 sticker or the Drift Day whatever,
you would collect all the stickers on the car. Yeah.
And then I finally ended up going to one where I was like, oh, well, let's go drive. And I'm like, all right. So I went for a ride one, and I thought it was pretty cool.
Yeah.
But I wanted to drive one just to see what was going on. And then after that, that's when I was like, this is pretty fun.
Yeah. And do you think, you worked on a lot of drift cars. Do you think without that experience of actually driving it, it would kind of hold back some of the things that you were able to fabricate, or some of the miracles you were able, I call them miracles because I can't believe some of the things that you did, that you were able to do to drift cars to improve them?
100%.
Oh, okay.
100%.
Okay.
Like, if you drive a car, then it's the thing of, like, you can see what it's doing. And like I said, like, for me, my tops would be like, oh, I'm going 50, 60 miles an hour sideways. But these days they're like, 90, 100, whatever it is.
Yeah.
But regardless, that doesn't change the fact that what a chassis is actually doing when you're on and off the throttle. So that's probably the one thing that I always really try to take in driving, and then trying to figure out a car.
Okay.
And then even when I'd go for anybody that was like a professional driver, I was never looking at, out the window or, like, oh yeah, cool, blah, blah, blah. I was always looking down at
their feet, their
and
hands,
just listening to what the engine was doing. And I just keep looking down at there and listening. And then that made me go like, oh, I know what they're trying to do.
Got it.
And I see what to do.
Yeah.
Like, I know how to set this thing up.
Yeah.
And that helped me a ton.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's cool.
But driving was always fun.
Yeah. So you got into cars really early on. I think I read somewhere 91 is when you.
It was earlier than that.
Okay.
But where I really started, I guess you could say, really getting into working on them more.
Okay.
Would probably be around that time.
Okay.
Yeah.
And tell us about the scene back then. What?
Well, see, it's really weird because I come from a side of it that was, my really good friends were all about drag racing.
Yeah.
And it was domestic drag racing.
Okay.
So I was that
around what
Mustang
year?
guy, and it was right around then.
Right around 91.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
no. It was, I would say, like 89 to 91, right around there.
Okay.
Was when it was domestic drag racing.
Yeah.
And it's guys that I still talk to.
Yeah.
And coincidentally, it's the guy's drag car that I still work on. That's the craziest thing I've ever worked on to this day, drag race wise.
Mm-hmm.
It was his son that I grew up with in high school. So we were always big into drag racing, but the dad is what really kind of inspired a lot of it.
Okay.
And we used to build stuff out of his garage. And from there, just spawned off to I became this guy of like, oh, let's keep playing with this stuff. Let's keep playing with this stuff.
You kind of found something that you really love to do, is like tinker with things and fabricate and stuff like that.
Yeah. That's what it was. It was his home garage, but I gotta build whatever I wanted out of this place.
Yeah.
And it was my ultimate hobby shop. And I really find it funny that now, I guess at the time to where it was now, maybe like 20 years was the span.
Yeah.
And then he calls me up out of the blue and he's like, hey, I need stuff done on this drag car. And
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, well, I feel like I owe you. So yeah, let's go ahead and do it, you know, and I jump back into the drag racing side of it from the domestic side of it of there.
Mm.
It was at that same time back in 90, 91 that I started, you know, tinkering in the import side of it.
Okay.
Because I had friends that were just diehard domestic guys. And then
Yeah.
I had the friends that were into imports, but I was not into imports.
Right.
And
Was it less cool?
I was the very hypocritical,
Okay.
like, oh, you need V8. Blah,
Yeah.
blah. I was one of those guys.
Yeah.
And then the second that I started playing with a lot of like the 4-cylinder stuff,
Mm-hmm.
going like, wow, these things are f***ing crazy.
Why?
Like, I think it was the technology side of
Okay.
it. You know what I mean? I was so used to like
big displacement,
yeah.
lots of cylinders.
Exactly.
Mhm.
And then once I started playing with that, I was like, wow, this stuff is not just easier to work on.
Yeah.
It's like, I mean, you can make power out of these things.
Yeah.
And I couldn't believe it. And then, so I started getting more into that.
Okay.
And that kind of distanced me from a lot of my domestic friends because they were just like, wait,
They had the opinion that you had before.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I was that same guy.
Yeah.
And it took, you know, playing with my friends' cars.
Yeah.
Because they knew that I knew how to work on a car.
Yeah.
So they would show up, you know, at my parents' house.
Yeah.
And then be like, hey, you ever install a camshaft on a overhead car?
Yeah.
I'm like, huh? Like, I've never seen anything like that.
Yeah,
let's open it up and look at it. I was like, oh, I could figure it out.
Yeah.
And then sure enough, I'd figure it out. And you know, I grew up in San Diego.
Okay.
So there was like where the domestic drag races would happen.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was where the import drag races would happen.
You're talking about on the street?
Yeah, that was 100% the street.
Mm-hmm.
So I would always go to the domestic side of it. I'm like, oh yeah, this is where they drag race.
Yeah.
And then when I started, you know, playing with my friends' import cars, they're like, oh, we're going to go to drag race.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay. It's like, hey, you missed the exit.
Yeah.
And they're like, no. And I was like, wait, what? And then it opened up to this whole import side of like where they drag race.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I had no idea that they were doing this over here.
Oh, okay.
And then I got really big into it.
Okay.
And I was like, wow, this is crazy.
Yeah.
And then playing with the cars and everything. I think I made my name from that because I don't care what it was. I just wanted to play with it. But the import side of it it intrigued me because I did not know, you know, what I was up against. And it was fun.
Tell me about what it was like back then to want, like if you were someone who wanted to fix up their Honda, because we had Toshi Hayama on last season and he was telling us about, you know, when kind of how Apex started in the USA.
Mm-hmm.
And it was because he was into Hondas and, you know, he had the idea of like, well, we have to cater to what's popular here, which is the Hondas. Japan, it really wasn't. So he kind of was able to leverage his relationships with Apex to get some support so that they can build Honda applications. So, but that was much later than 91. 91 what was available back then? Like how were people fixing up their Hondas without all the aftermarket support that there was much later?
So I think what started a lot of it was Option Magazine.
Mm-hmm.
So Option Magazine, like when you go through those, like the way that their publication was it was the coolest thing ever because every page you wanted to analyze every single picture.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, wow, like I wish we can get that.
Yeah.
I wish we can get that. And we were lucky because you can get HKS stuff, but the price was crazy.
Yeah, they were around a long time.
Yeah. And it was before, you know, even Grady came here.
Yeah.
So everything was always, oh, HKS. It's like HKS. We got to get that.
Okay.
And you had access to it, but nobody had the money for it.
Yeah.
So I think that's why you would see the Honda side of it, or even really like, I guess you could say the import drag racing side of it. You could see that side of it where it spawned off to the DIY guy.
Okay.
Because it was like, I cannot afford that HKS thing.
Yeah.
I'm going to figure this out on my own.
Yeah.
Let me go ahead and make what I got to make. And like, it's not like how it is today.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, you can go on Amazon and build a car.
I think I just saw a turbo on a Temu ad. I was like, you don't want to buy a turbo from Temu, but you know, if that's all the money you got.
But
Yeah.
it's that's what it was. It was all the DIY guys that were just like, oh, well, like I wish I had, the HKS stuff.
Yeah.
But shoot, if I can't afford it
Yeah.
and I want to be turbo, I'm going to make my stuff.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what happened with me. And I want to say that probably was 91.
Okay.
Or I analyzed, like, I saw a buddy of mine, he bought a turbo kit for his Integra.
Mm-hmm.
And it was, this really hokey, kit.
Yeah.
And growing up in San Diego, we drove all the way to, LA to buy this thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then we were surprised that we even made it back down because it just did not run right.
Yeah.
And then I just remember looking at it. Like, I sat there and I analyzed it going like, God, this looks really easy to make. Like, I think I can make one. And then I had welding background just because, my brother, he worked at a welding company that actually, they built welders. So we always had welders at the house. So I had to learn how to use a welder and everything.
Yeah.
And I remember just like looking at it. And then after that, started building one, and we built one. And
you built your own turbo kit.
Yeah. Yeah. And
yeah.
Then, I mean, I wouldn't want anybody to see it now.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it worked.
Yeah.
But if it was like the one problem that we always had was we always kept blowing the gasket between the manifold and the turbo.
Mm-hmm.
And it was one of those things where it's like, damn it, we got to pull the whole front end off again. So it was pretty bad.
Yeah.
But
was it like one of those do it yourself gaskets, or what were you using?
No, we were using at the time we kept ordering Nissan parts for
it. Okay.
Because the Nissan T3 side or the T25 side was the same.
Okay.
Like the gasket was the same. So
from a Z or something.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was a T3 from a Z.
Okay.
I don't even remember what year.
Yeah.
But we just kept ordering Nissan gaskets for this thing. We're like, get the Nissan gasket. That'll fit on there. But because the manifold I built was so like hideous that we just kept blowing it.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm like, oh man, dang, we got to pull the front end off again.
Yeah.
So it's like, if we were at the street races, it would be the thing of like, oh, I can hear it. We blew it again.
Yeah.
All right, let's just go home.
Yeah.
Slow
as hell.
Yeah. And then I think that car probably taught me how to build like thing of like everything as, oh man, like let's pretend everything's going to break. Let's make sure we can service this thing.
Oh, nice.
And then that's when it came down to we're like, oh, okay, cool. So everything after that car I built is like, okay, we're going to blow a head gasket.
Yeah.
So let's
like how can we do this so we don't have to take the front end off?
Let's design this thing to where we don't have to pull the front end off and do any of that stuff.
Yeah.
And we did that. So it worked.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah. So like back then when you showed up to the drag races, was it like you guys were like looking at everyone's like fabrication work, their DIY builds and stuff, and like learning from each other? Was it kind of like that? You guys were like keeping secrets and be like
100%.
Like, I'm not popping my hood, let's just run kind of thing.
Exactly. Like,
and then people like, dude, what'd they do to that car? Like, is he running slick? Like, is all the questions.
You heard the rumors from friends of what the car actually had.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, like it has this, it has that, blah, blah. But you never really got to see it.
Yeah.
And it was. So you just had to be creative on what you were going to do the next time based off of what everybody else was saying.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it's like, oh man, that thing is nuclear power.
Yeah.
You're like, oh man, I got to figure out nuclear power. Yeah. So it was.
Dude, that sounds like F1. It's like,
no.
What do they got going on over there?
Nobody wanted to show you what they actually had.
I remember that was a thing at the street races where, like,
pop hood.
Like, are you going to pop hood? I'm not going to run unless you pop hood.
Yeah.
And then that got really popular to the point where like people wouldn't run unless you actually pop hood.
Yeah.
But it's really funny because as I said, I grew up in San Diego and every now and then all the LA guys would come down and it was like, dude, they were just at speeds that were
a different
way
level
beyond
Who
us.
are the LA guys?
Like what are some names?
Oh, Miles Bautista.
Yeah.
He was one of the guys that was like, for drag racing, I can really say that there's two people that I saw that made me go like, we need to step it up and we're going to go faster.
Yeah.
Because this guy's way too fast.
Yeah.
And that was, this is more, okay, so this isn't really street racing now, but this is more of Battle of Imports at Palmdale.
Yeah.
Was Miles Bautista. Like, because we pitted right next to him.
Mm-hmm.
And oh man, I thought we were the best. I was like, oh man, we came with the good car, blah blah.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I saw his, and I'm like, what the heck is that? And it was like next level.
Yeah.
But I would probably say before that, it was Junior Aspers.
Okay.
He was, to me, he is 100% the front wheel drive pioneer.
Okay.
Of, taking it to that next level, but in a really clean car. Like he was the guy that had all the HKS.
What kind of car was it? I'm not familiar with his name.
It's it's that year of like, I guess you could say 88 to 91. So it's an EF Civic.
Okay.
And yeah, I mean the guy he started out with all the HKS parts.
Okay.
So he was like, he had that Japanese influence that was like, oh, this is fast.
Yeah.
And it was 100%. The first Battle Imports I went to, he ran 13 seconds in a Civic.
When was that?
Oh geez, I don't even remember. Like it was early 90s.
That was fast.
Yeah, no, that was fast. And I was just like, whoa, I go,
yeah,
that's possible?
Yeah.
Okay, I need to do whatever I can to actually make a car faster than this.
Yeah.
Like it was never
because you saw it was possible.
It was the respect of like, that's crazy.
Yeah.
I just needed to see that was possible.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go faster.
Yeah.
And that's all it was.
Yeah.
It drove you more, to go faster.
Yeah.
So for me, Junior Asper was the guy that's just like, okay, I'm gonna beat you.
So did you beat him?
We never lined up. We never lined up. He kind of, I'm not gonna say he fell out of it because now if you look up Junior, like he just, I don't know, I can't say that's recently. A couple of years ago, he got back into it and he built like a really badass Mugen CRX.
Okay.
And that's what I have right now. Well, actually, you know what? The car that I have now is the car that I raced at Battle Imports when I pitted right next to Miles.
Wow.
Just was stumped on Miles' car.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, it's pretty crazy because I thought mine was like, we're going to beat everybody.
Yeah.
And I was like, I didn't even make the field. Yeah.
But did you start building other people? So you built other people's cars, for drag. And so tell me, do you have any claim to fame cars that you helped build?
I'd probably say I built more people's cars than I built anything of my own.
Uh-huh.
Like, and that goes for anything, for drifting, drag racing, whatever it was. Like, I built more of everybody else's car than I built of my own because they had the funds to do what they wanted to do.
Yeah.
But I had the mentality of just like, I want to win.
Yeah.
So it's going to take your wallet.
Yeah.
To do this.
Yeah.
And so that's what it was. But at the time, I would probably say there was a really good friend of mine, Dave Shih, that he had a CRX that was known to run 10 seconds. And the shop that I worked at, we ended up doing a lot of stuff on that thing. And he's like, oh, I want to try something different.
Yeah.
I want to try to make a tube chassis. So we experimented with that side of it. And then so we had the first tube chassis Honda like ever.
Yeah.
Like I wish I could say that it was faster than everybody else's once it actually went tube chassis, but we were learning.
Yeah.
Like we didn't know what to do. So
what shop were you at?
A shop called Dynamic Autosports.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
That was a big name.
It was at the time, yeah. Especially when it came to
when it was drag racing,
the drag racing side of it.
When Nadine and I were both around more as spectators, but like we kind of witnessed drag racing and how the imports were in a race to break into the 10 seconds.
Yeah.
And right now you just mentioned Dave Shih's CRX running 10 seconds, but from some of the research I did, he didn't get there until you started working on the car.
No. When the car was still unibody, he was the first 10-second car.
Yeah.
And then, a few months later, that's when I kind of came on
board. You came in a little bit later.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But I got to drive the car when it was still unibody 10-second. And it was the craziest thing I've ever driven. Like, it wasn't safe.
This is what, like 97? around there? 98?
No, I want to say it was earlier.
A little
than
bit
that.
earlier?
Yeah, maybe like 96 or so.
Okay.
I don't know. I could be wrong. Like,
Yeah.
I really suck on my years.
That's all good.
My age is kind of nuts.
We won't ask you your age.
Yeah, but I don't remember the year.
Okay.
But, I want to say that we started doing the whole tube chassis build started happening in either end of 96 or 97.
Okay.
Is when that was going down.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
those were exciting times watching
was.
Hondas getting into the 10s after so many years and then breaking into the 9s. Like everyone was trying to one up each other. Like we were there when Top Fuel came and brought their CRX and they tried to compete with the Americans. The Americans blew them out of the water. And like that was really exciting for me and that kind of gave me the passion to like get into cars, just seeing all of that happen. Yeah.
I mean, it really was like, I think for me, the best part about that whole period of time was the innovation.
Yeah.
Like, because I'm a tinkerer. Like, I like to build stuff. And it was the whole thing of like, no, like, we got to go faster. What are we going to do?
Mm-hmm.
Every single, like, 2 months can go by. We got to go faster.
Yeah,
what are we going to do?
Yeah.
And, everybody was just, more power. And
yeah.
that's all it was.
More
and
power,
like,
the tube chassis, like you were saying, you saw like single piece front ends, and then the slicks sticking out the sides of the fenders, and then you saw wheelie bars and
I think I mean the worst part about the whole thing is I would probably say the tube chassis side of it though, because like we were trying to go faster by going tube chassis, and then as much as the CRX still looked like a CRX, it really came down to where the cars stopped looking like the cars. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like it's, I would say at the end of the tube chassis front wheel drive era, it came down to where like, oh, whoa, here comes that one car. What is it? Like,
I don't know. Yeah.
Once you get to that point, you lose everybody that's following anything what it is. It's never, it's like, oh, is it a Honda or is that a Pontiac Sunfire? Yeah. Like, I don't know.
It's like NASCAR.
Yeah. Once it got to that point, I think that fell off to where people like, people were following because they wanted to see the fast time. Yeah. And then the love of what made you like that car was out the door.
Because then it becomes too far to grasp.
Exactly.
Like you might have an Integra, but that car was an Integra.
Yeah,
so like you have no.
But you can't put a reference of like, well, but my Integra does not look like that.
Yeah.
You can't do that anymore. And I think that's the part of it where stuff starts to fall apart, or like series starts to fall apart. Yeah. When you cannot recognize the regular guy that wants to see something go fast. Right. And it no longer looks like their car. Yeah. Like I hate to say it because I love World Time Attack stuff, but the cars are getting ridiculous. Like you can't tell what it is. Yeah. You know what I mean? If you can't tell what it is, and it's just like, how are you going to draw that attention of what it is? Right. What I love. Right.
I think you're always going to have the argument of the people who think like, if that's what it takes to push it further, to make it make drivers faster, to make it more competitive by like not holding them back by saying you have to be in a stock body. You have those guys saying that who want to see that, and then you have the people
that just want to see something go fast.
Yeah, and I think like Nadine and I and Mark, we all see it like you, where we like when we see some competition, but it's relatable to the common person.
That's exactly what it is. It has, like, to me, I mean, this is just my personal opinion. Yeah. It has to be relatable to those people that are standing in the stands. Yeah. Like, if they're not standing in the stands, like, because the fact that they love Integras, they love S13s, they love, 350Zs, whatever it is, like, it's just like, you can root for that 350Z, but how much is that is really a 350Z?
Right. Like, you don't have, I'm sure you don't have NASCAR fans being like, oh, look at that Camry, Mom. You have a race car.
Exactly. No, you don't. Yeah. It really is at that point, though. But I get it. Everybody just wants to go faster. So, that's what I would want to do. Yeah. That means, it's no longer the car that I actually, love, then
Yeah.
I'm going to go faster.
Yeah.
But that's, I think, what ruined a lot of it.
This episode is brought to you by Lot USA. Lot USA has been the master distributor of Brid racing seats for the past 18 years. Celebrating their 42 years in operation, Brid manufactures high-quality performance products for circuit, drag, GT, and drift.
Nadine and I have always run Brid seats in our cars, and even today, Brid seats are the latest mod in our new drift car. Our favorite seats are the FIA-approved Zeta 4 and the reclinable bucket seat, the Stradia 3.
One of the latest releases from Brid is the Zeta 4 Vireo, which is a size small version of the Zeta 4 for petite drivers. Visit lot-usa.com for more info and follow them on IG at lot_USA. This episode is brought to you by Bartleby. Bartleby is a car builder and tuner in the Central Texas, Austin area. In addition to other Nissans like the 350Z, they specialize in GTRs, R32 through 35, and has over 10 years experience. In terms of tuning, they work with most standalone ECUs like Motec, M-Tron, Link, Haltech, and AEM, to name a few. Bartleby has tuned some of our friends' infamous cars, including J-Spec Sam's blue R32 GTR. When we get our GTR, we know where we're sending it to get tuned: Bartleby. For more info, visit bartleby.com and be sure to check out their dyno tuning videos on IG at Bartleby. So you ended up working at a magazine. So you were at So you went from building to being a technical editor.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So tell us about that. Like, those magazines aren't in print anymore. So there may be some people listening that don't know these. But tell us, how did you end up at Turbo and Import Tuner? Is that the Prime Media group?
But before that, it was called IGC.
Oh, God. You're going way back.
Yeah. Well, I was a follower of Turbo Magazine from like the 80s.
Yeah.
So I followed Turbo Magazine from the 80s.
That would be the one for you, because that one was kind of a more technical.
It was 100%. Yeah. And I think that has a lot to do with the growth of the import scene is Turbo Magazine, because they didn't just cover, here's a Grand National with a turbo.
Yeah. Here's
a Mustang and it has a turbo on it.
Yeah.
It really got into the whole Japanese side of this is, a 90 or 85 240ZX or whatever, 280ZX with a turbocharger, 300ZX with a turbocharger, whatever it was. I think that magazine kind of struck me of technology. I was like, oh man, this is cool.
I would so hire you if I were them. That's why you got the job. You probably came into your interview. You're like, I've been reading this since I was.
I was the nerd. I just was into that, which is funny because, believe it or not, before I got the job at Turbo Magazine, I actually did have an interview at Super Street.
Okay.
When it first they were maybe about a year into it.
Yeah.
And then I got a job there, but kind of glad I didn't do it.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it was just look at them now.
Yeah.
But and then the opportunity with Turbo Magazine came up, and coincidentally, I was working on the tube chassis car at the time, the Dave Shih CRX.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just like, God, what am I doing? This just doesn't I love what I do.
Yeah.
But man, this isn't bringing me anywhere.
The magazine?
Well, yeah. Which
one? The car.
The car.
Okay.
Yeah, the car. I was just like, God, I gotta figure out something else.
Yeah.
And of course, your parents are hounding you too. So it's
get a real job.
Get a real job.
Yeah.
And I'm lucky because my parents understood the fact that hey, I ain't going to school.
Yeah.
I'm gonna do something.
Yeah.
And so I want to say the CRX was the first one that really traveled, state to state and raced everywhere.
Yeah.
So it was, I was having fun.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I was just like, God, this ain't working. It ain't going to pay the bills.
Yeah.
So then I told Dynamic Autosports, and I told Dave, who owned the car, I'm like, hey, you know what? I'm going to go back to school.
Yeah.
I guess I'm going to go back to school. My parents are right.
Yeah.
I'm out.
Yeah. So I registered for school, and then it was just community college. And then literally right when everybody found out that I was going to quit the shop and I was just going to go back to school. Sure enough, I knew one of the magazine guys, and he called me right away.
Phone
He's
rang.
like, hey, he's like, like, we kind of want you to work over here.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh man, like, I just registered for school.
Yeah.
Like, I was like,
Make it worth my time.
Yeah. and so I did the interview and everything. And then they're like, okay. I go, well, do I have time to kind of think about this? Because I kind of just registered for school.
Yeah.
And they're like, yeah. It's like, you don't have to start until whatever it was, January or something like that. Oh, no. Sorry. It had to have been February because school started. So I went to school for that 1 month.
1 month. Yeah.
And I was like everything, like I love math, but I suck at math.
Yeah. That's weird.
Yeah. I really suck at math.
You kind of have to be good at math to do your job.
Yeah. Ask all my engineer friends
Yeah.
right now that are in the industry.
Yeah.
And they say the same thing.
Yeah.
They're just like, dude, just like, I cannot believe you did not want to learn math. Like, and I'm like, I go, well, that's why I got you guys. I just ask you the questions.
Yeah.
But I ended up going for 1 month, and then I remember my math class, and I was just like, God, this is so easy. Like, why wasn't I paying attention when I went to school before? Like, I go, this is so easy. I could totally do this.
It's different when you want to learn it versus when you're there because mom wants you to go or whatever.
Exactly. So now I was going for myself.
Oh.
And I was just like, this is easy. And I was doing really good. And I was just like, I kind of want to stay in school.
Oh.
But at the same time, like my older brother, Jay, he's kind of like, he's my superhero. Like, I look up to him 100% for everything. So I was like, I got to ask him.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, so, I could either work at and he read Turbo Magazine too.
Oh, no.
And I was like, so it's either go work at the magazine or just stay in school. And I'm doing pretty good in school. So it's like, dude, I'm actually paying attention now.
Yeah.
And then he's like, go to the magazine. I was like, okay, I'll just go to the magazine.
Yeah.
And then I think it was like after like 3 weeks or something like that, you can get your money back from school.
Okay.
Like it's like you drop out or whatever it is, or you drop your class.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, I'm gonna take the magazine job. So I started the magazine.
Nice.
And then when I did that, like, it just opened up a whole nother world to me.
Yeah.
Like, it was a positive, like 100% a positive. I wouldn't know half the people I know if I didn't take that job.
Yeah.
So
brother was right.
Yeah, 100%. He was right. And I was just like, oh man, I'm so glad I did this because I wouldn't know half the people I know. I wouldn't know half of anything like car wise I know.
Yeah.
Like it opened it up. And what was scary was I only had, I had photography classes that I took, and I was remedial reading and writing, in high school.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh man, I don't know if I'm gonna be able to do this.
Yeah.
Like, this is kind of crazy.
Yeah.
And I remember Evan Griffey was my boss and at the magazine. And he's like, well, you have photography skills. So he's like, just
they could use
work
you
on that.
Yeah.
He's like, you're hired for technical articles.
Yeah.
Just, we'll be your copy editor.
Yeah.
So we'll copy edit everything the icks you write. And then my first story, I turned it in and it felt like high school, like red marks all over everything. And I'm like, oh my God. So I got to rewrite it. So I had to rewrite it, turn it back in, and then same red marks all over it. I'm like, oh man. And I remember going to Evan going like, hey, I go, honestly, I don't know if I'm really made to do this job. Cause like, I mean, my stories I have to keep redoing. And then the reassurance that he gave me was a thing of like, Gary, we did not hire you for your writing skills.
Yeah.
He's like, write what you need to write, technical.
Yeah.
We'll work on the writing part of it. And from there, I was like, okay, cool.
Nice.
I'm not going to get fired today.
Yeah.
And so ever since then, it was bad because then it came down to like, oh, this is a fast car. And, blah, blah. And then I give it to the copy editor. And then at this time, we had a copy editor that would just fix everything.
Yeah.
And then they wouldn't even give it back to me.
Nice.
And I'm like, oh, this is awesome.
Sick.
Nice.
Yeah. I'm a writer.
Yeah.
They made it go real fast.
Yeah.
I kind of, it's funny because I knew Scott Sunishi.
Yep.
Before he became an editor at Import Racer. Import Tuner.
Yeah.
And like when I found out he was applying for that job, I'm like, you sure, dude? Like,
Mm.
you sure you can write?
That's funny you say that because, like, for me, I was just like, wow, Scott is an awesome writer.
Yeah.
Because I'd read his stuff and I'd be like, man,
Yeah.
he can write.
Yeah.
And I think it's because I was such a shitty writer.
Mm.
Yeah. I think all my copy editors probably hated me.
Yeah.
But
you had that technical ability that couldn't be replaced.
Yeah. So when Evan told me that, I
Yeah.
just realized it's like, okay, let me focus on what I need to focus on, which is learning, like if somebody had a new product. Oh,
Yeah.
explain this to me.
Yeah,
Explain this to me.
Yeah.
And that kind of worked in my hand because it also came down to where, like, I remember going to a bunch of different manufacturers and they didn't know I was as technical as what I really was.
Yeah.
So it came down to where I always played dumb.
Okay.
Like, oh, hey, how does this work? And they're like, okay, so check it out. This is our secret.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, this guy has no idea that I build race cars or anything. So I'm like, I'm going to learn from this guy.
Okay.
So I use that to my
So you
advantage.
were working on your craft.
Oh, yeah.
You're building
100%.
a fabrication craft while you're doing editing.
Yeah, I was. So, well, I mean, now that you say that, yeah, that's exactly what it was.
Yeah.
Because, Lan, Higa, and Jensen, they were at Apex.
Yeah.
And that was on the way home from work.
Mm.
So it was, it was my playground.
Yeah.
And everything I learned, whatever it was from whatever manufacturer I went to at the magazine, I was like, guys, check this out. You know what I mean? Like, there's this thing that's coming out and I want to learn it, you know?
And it was crazy because like Len and Jensen were already really good at what they're doing. And they kind of came from a similar background. You
drag racing, yeah.
Drag racing. They were making a big name for themselves out in Hawaii.
Mm-hmm.
I guess like as we were touching on like being abroad, being an editor at Turbo, you get to travel a lot.
Oh yeah, that was living out of a suitcase.
Yeah, and I think I remember from like what was that video that Toshi Hayama did with Hiro? What was it called?
Oh yeah,
ADM Insider.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that was.
You were in some of those shots in like Tokyo Auto Salon. Was that while you were at Turbo Magazine? You were just traveling
I was still
with
at
them?
the magazine then.
Okay.
So like Tokyo Auto Salon was like every year I'd go to Tokyo Auto Salon.
Yeah.
And that was actually, it was really cool to go to that one.
Yeah.
One because if you're a JDM nerd, it's like you got to go to Tokyo Auto Salon. So you see a whole side of it that you don't see in the US.
Yeah.
And that side of
Unless it's through magazines, but it's very limited on what you see. Yeah.
It is. And then for me, I was always that excited guy that was like, whoa,
you want to learn everything.
They don't have this. I'm going to shoot this. And
all the products and stuff.
So a lot of the Tokyo Auto Salon stuff was, it was always a collaboration of everybody's photos that went to Tokyo Auto Salon.
Yeah.
But for me, I was just the nerd of like, God, they do stuff so much different.
Yeah.
Like it's crazy. Like,
did you touch on the cultural differences in your magazines, your articles, or were you really focused on like the technical stuff?
I was really focused on the technical side of
Okay.
it, but the design side of things, from the way that stuff was designed in Japan and the way that stuff was designed over here, it was way different.
Okay.
Like there was so much philosophy behind the way that they design stuff versus us. Like, hey, check it out. Like it makes so much power.
Yeah.
It's like, but it looks like a piece of shit.
Yeah.
Like they I mean, from packaging to you name it, like they did everything way better. So when you're cruising through Tokyo Auto Salon, you're just paying attention to a lot of that stuff. And I'm like, wow, it's like, that's perfect marketing capabilities right there.
Right.
It's just like, this is how you sell it. Like packaging is everything,
While you were out there, did you go check out drifting?
Yeah, we did.
Okay.
We checked it out at a couple different spots. I'm not gonna lie, I kind of fell asleep at a few of them
because they're in the middle of the night.
Yeah, then it was in the middle of the night. I'm like, I'm just gonna go to sleep. So I go to sleep, but I'd wake up to hear it, and I'm like, oh yeah, they're drifting. And there was always that one corner that was always really famous that everybody used to always drift in a industrial area.
Is it Oifuto?
By
the docks?
I was asleep.
You didn't know where you were.
I was asleep. I don't know. But I just remember getting out of the car and I was just like, wow, this is crazy.
Yeah.
Like, it's really organized is what it is.
Yeah.
Like their version of street racing is way more organized than what we have.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, I did it, but I can't say I did it a lot. Yeah. I mean, not did it, but I've gone to them.
You saw it. You saw
Yeah.
it firsthand
I've saw it
before
firsthand.
a lot of us did.
Yeah. So that was really cool.
Did you think that it would become what it's become when you saw it back then?
No.
You thought it was kind of this niche thing that was only going to be in Japan?
I thought it was really cool
Yeah.
to watch.
Yeah.
And when it did come here, or actually that was Toshi's the whole side of it, which I was like, oh, it's coming here.
Yeah.
I remember I was working at the magazine, but at the
Yeah.
same time, like my playground was, you know, Apex with
Mhm.
Len and Jensen.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so I caught wind of the whole thing of like, oh yeah, D1's coming over here. And
Yeah.
I'm like, oh man, how is this going to be? Like, this is going to be crazy.
Yeah.
Like it's, you know, I was a drag racer guy.
Yeah.
I was like, man, this can go pretty good.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
Yeah.
It was so 50-50.
Yeah.
But I will say, the deciding point that I knew that it was going to be nuts was, I was still at the magazine. And, I think at the time, I was helping Len and Jensen do like a roll cage in, I think it was maybe Motor X's 350Z
Mm-hmm.
because Imamura needed something to drive for a demo
Okay.
at Irwindale. And I want to say you guys were there too, because I think you guys remember this, but it was 100% a NASCAR event. Like drifting was not why we were at Irwindale.
Yeah.
It was 100% a NASCAR event, but they shipped out like a bunch of cars from Japan that were drift cars, and they housed majority of them at Apex. So I got to see them all, and it's like, oh, okay. I don't know how this is going to be. This is going to be pretty crazy.
Yeah.
And so we ended up going, and I remember I was shooting it for the magazine and standing where they were displaying all the cars. Like, I never saw the most racist thing ever, which is just all these guys that are there to watch NASCAR walking by these cars, just talking crap.
Yeah.
You know, like basically they wanted nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
And I was just like, I don't know how this is going to go.
Yeah.
Then they go out and then they killed it. They were just drifting the whole thing. And even myself, like at Irwindale, because, you know, we were always stuck in the parking lot.
Yeah.
I mean,
We didn't get to go in the bank.
Very first time I ever seen anybody do big banks. You know, they didn't do the small bank, but all they did was big bank.
Yeah.
And then that was it.
Yeah.
And I was just like, that was nuts.
Yeah.
Hey, the parking lot, no problem.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I totally did that.
It's all good.
I was like, parking lot, no problem.
Yeah.
But like, dude, these guys are doing it on the bank.
Yeah.
I'm like, that is crazy.
Yeah, and they're going crazy fast.
And they did it. Yeah. And then all of a sudden, like the demo, it was a demo.
Yeah.
It was over. All the cars pulled back in.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember this, and I think I still have slide film from this.
Yeah.
The same people that were walking by talking all this crap were coming back, the biggest fans.
Yeah.
Like, that was the craziest thing I've ever seen.
Yeah.
So it went from this whole thing of like, what the hell are those cars doing here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
To, that was the craziest thing I've ever seen.
Yeah.
And they were only there for NASCAR.
Right.
They weren't there for that. They didn't even know that was going on.
Right.
And that changed my mind. I was just like, wow, this is going to be huge, dude.
Yeah.
Like, this is going to be crazy. You just turned a NASCAR guy into like,
right.
like
You
that
can
is
do
nuts.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that really was, I don't know, maybe you guys can back me up on this or be against me, but I want to say that was the first time I've ever seen them do big bank.
Yeah. So I remember that happening, but we weren't there. And we didn't really know that was happening. So
It was very low key.
Yeah. So I kind of just heard that it had happened.
Mm-hmm.
The first time that I saw anyone drifting the bank was at the Apex test day, which I think was after.
Oh, that was after.
I'm not. What it was?
Was it? Was Imamura driving the
Yes.
RX-7?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, because that car wasn't done.
It wasn't done yet.
No, that was the right hand.
It was the right hand drive.
Yeah, that was
right?
the right hand drive
Yeah.
one. So
So it happened. We didn't get to see it. So I keep telling people that was the first time anyone's drifted the bank, but that's false. It was at the NASCAR demo, which I didn't get to see.
And that's why we had to build Motor X's 350Z.
Yeah.
Because Imamura just needed something to drive.
Yeah.
And so Motor X ended up, we ended up using their Z. And it's kind of funny because I used to build a lot of roll cages. So I used to build a lot of drag race roll cages.
Yeah.
So one of the funny thing is that got me realizing more of the drift side of it is I a drag roll cage, the bar that goes, right by your shoulder. It's basically the door bar.
Yeah.
On a drag car, it has to pass between your shoulder and your elbow.
Okay.
It has to be that high.
Okay.
So we kept building them like that.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, like, we kept building them like that. And all these drifters are like, I keep hitting my elbow on this
I
thing.
see.
I'm like, well, that's legal.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, that's legal in drag racing.
Yeah.
And it's like, so I guess I could lower it?
Yeah.
They're like, yeah, lower it. And it's like, all of a sudden they just started going lower. And they're
Yeah.
like, oh yeah, this is how you have to do it. And then from there, we're like, okay, there's a difference between a drag cage
Right.
and a drift cage.
Right.
So we started building them where they were lower, but for the longest time we kept building them with the bar really high, and then every driver just complained about it.
How many drift cages did you make?
Oh geez, I don't even remember.
Like 20, 50, hundreds, thousands?
I would probably say over 100, maybe.
That's a lot.
Yeah. I don't know. That sounds kind of high. Like, but I don't know.
It's possible.
I'm old.
Yeah, and you're bad at math.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but yeah, it was weird to see the transition.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I want to say after that, right before D1 driver search, I mean, it was getting crazy. We were building more drift cages than we were drag cages.
Yeah.
Because the whole thing was my agreement with Apex was, with Toshi, was he gave me enough space for one car to do whatever project I wanted to do, as long as I did their fabrication too.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, cool. Yeah, no problem. So that's why, me, Len, and Jensen did the roll cage in the 350Z. And then we did Imamura's right-hand drive car, and then like whole random, just cars. But then dude, after hours, me, Len, and Jensen were like, we were drift fabrication shop.
Yeah.
Like doing
just
cages.
Yeah.
Just millions of roll cages.
Do you remember the most important cage that you did was
I do.
Nadine's car?
Okay. Sorry, I do know that, but
he's like, I don't remember making her cage.
I don't remember a lot of them.
Yeah.
But I remember we did your cage. But the one I would say that kind of made me realize something drift cage wise was when, if you remember, Ken Miyoshi had an S13 and Ben Schwartz drove it.
Yes.
So we did the cage in that one. And I just remember Ben is
hella
he's
tall.
big.
God, he's 9 foot something. And they're like, oh yeah, the driver's gonna come by Apex and he's gonna so you can measure him up.
Yeah.
I'm like, all right. And that was on Ken Miyoshi's car. So we ended up measuring him, and it was just the same, holy cow, is this guy gonna fit?
Yeah.
It was crazy.
Yeah.
And we did the cage in it. And I wanna say it was either was it D1 qualifying or something like that, or driver search that they actually did?
I'm not sure.
Okay, well, he did one for Ken in that car, and Ben, after we finished the cage that weekend, he backed it into the wall really bad. And I remember me and Jensen just going I want to see the cage.
Yeah.
Because I never built a cage
that crashed.
This. Yeah, that's a drift car cage.
Yeah,
none of the cars that we built that were drift cars that crashed.
Yeah.
And then we go over there, we look at it, and we start looking at everything. We're like, oh wow, okay, yeah,
it worked.
This totally works.
Yeah.
We can get away with having these door bars low or doing the the rear kickers the way they are.
Yeah.
And we're like, okay, cool. So it just kind of felt a little bit more safe, but it was a scary moment because he backed it in bad.
Yeah.
And it was just like, oh my god, I hope he comes out. And
right.
He got out, and then when I saw him I was like, can we look at the cage?
Yeah.
So me and Jensen go over there and we look at the cage. And we're
Yeah.
like, wow, it's crazy how good it works.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that.
Testament,
but I do remember yours.
Testament to your. You did my cage in Lake Forest.
Yeah, at your shop down there.
I did it. I did it at my shop. Yeah,
I remember the drive home.
That's right when I left the magazine. Was when I started working at a Lake Forest.
Why did you leave the magazine?
Okay, so as much as I said, Toshi gave me space to actually work on, he was like, oh yeah, you got this much space in Apex as long as you keep doing our stuff. It's like, okay. So I did all their fab work, and then the guy I used to work with at Dynamic Autosports was Ben Chong.
Mm-hmm.
And then he recently went to RS-R.
Right.
And so he asked me, and he was like, oh, yeah. He's like, so you down to build a car for us? And I was like, oh, what is it? And so this is when I first met John.
Okay.
And we ended up going to...
John from RS-R.
Yeah.
What was his last name?
Masuda. So we ended up going to California Speedway, and that's where I got to meet John.
Yeah.
And then, so Ben introduced me to John. And
okay.
there was a drift event going on in the parking lot.
Yeah.
In the front parking lot. Not like the one all the way in the back.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, it was crazy. It was the front parking lot. And then, so we sat there and we talked, and it was funny because both me and John had like this love of Formula One.
Yeah.
So all we would talk about Formula One, we were supposed to be talking about building a car.
Yeah.
And came down to where, he's like, well, so we got we're going to get a S2000 from Honda and we need it built. Oh, yeah, I'll build it. Yeah. And then, they were going to give me the deal. And my whole thing was at the magazine was I wrote so much, there's so many stories and everything that I was so sick of writing.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, I wrote like 3 stories in high school. Well, I was doing like 5 a month, at the magazine. And I'm like, I'm so sick of this, dude. Like,
how long had it been at that point?
Like 5 years.
5 years.
Yeah. Maybe 4 years. Maybe about 4 years. Actually, no. I quit because of that. So it was like 5, almost 6 years. And then I just was over it. I was just like, I just don't like writing. I'm not a writer.
Right.
And I love working on cars. So I want to get back to working on cars.
Yeah.
And then it just came at the right opportunity because I was like, you know what? I think I'm going to quit and I want to get back to working on cars.
What did your big brother say?
I don't know. Like now that
at that point you're like, I'm not going to ask him anymore.
No. I would still tell him what was going on, but it was good because like I told him what I wanted to do and he was okay with it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But the best part about it was he was the main person that my parents always went to ask like, like he wants to do this now and blah, blah, blah.
Oh, okay.
He's going to leave this secure job.
What do you think about that?
Yeah. But my dad, my brother was the one that was just like, well, you got to think about it like this.
Wow.
So it worked out pretty good.
Yeah.
So he ended up, I know he probably talked to him. He never told me about it, but yeah. So he softened it up for him.
Nice.
I think. Yeah. And then he's like, okay, well, if that's what you want to do, then, you just make sure you have health insurance. Make sure you have this, blah, blah. Yeah. And I remember that because it was like, at the time, I mean, today's prices, health insurance wasn't that bad.
Yeah.
But, I mean, it's nuts today.
Yeah.
But at the time, I was just like, oh, man, if I can go do this on my own, like, this is crazy. So I ended up taking the RS-R deal, but it was the thing of like, there's no way Toshi's going to let me build the RS-R car out of Apex.
Right.
So that's when I used to do the stuff for Dynamic Autosports, they just moved into another building. So I was like, okay, he's going to rent me this spot where I can start my shop.
Yeah.
I was like, all right. And I already had equipment that I had at Apex. And so I was just moving everything over to, my new shop.
Yeah.
And it's like, all right, I'm going to do this. And so I took the deal with RS-R. I'm like, okay, I'm going to build it. And then literally like John just like, okay, well, what do you need right now?
Yeah.
I need this much.
Yeah.
And I'm like, dude, I'm leaving. You know what I mean?
Right.
I'm leaving the magazine. I'm like, this is crazy.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah. Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
And then so took that S2000 deal.
John said, okay.
Yeah. John said, okay. And took the S2000 deal. And then it was funny because the car showed up stock.
Yeah.
And I want to say you drove it too.
I did drive it.
I totally remember this because
it.
that was California Speedway, right?
California Speedway in the back.
Yep. California Speedway. And I remember because I just wanted to pick everybody's brain on this thing. And I was just like, God, I never made an S2000 drift car.
Yeah. No. By the way, no one did.
Yeah. So that was the thing. It was like, I guess from what I've been hearing was not even in Japan they wanted to do it because they're like, no. He's like, it sucks to make it a drift car.
Yeah.
It's like, you can't do it. And so we brought it to California Speedway. And then after, I think you drove it and like Taka, like Hiro, like everybody drove it.
Yeah.
And it's funny because the only 2 people that understood it, because I'm still to this day, I'm a big S2000 fan. The only two people that understood what was going on with the car was Calvin Wan and then you.
And me.
Because the steering.
Yeah.
And I just totally remember it because you came out and you're like, I don't even think you knew what was going on with the steering, but it was a thing of like, I don't know, something's stopping me from doing this, steering this thing. And I'm like, oh, he gets it.
Yeah.
Like, he knows why. And then Calvin came out, same thing. He's like, man, if I try to do this, he's like, it will not let me do it.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, so it's the rack and pinion.
Yeah.
Like, it's electronic. We got to get rid of that thing. And so we tried to campaign it for a bit with the rack on there. And I'm like, dude, John, like, he's stubborn Japanese guy.
Yeah.
I was like, no, we got to get rid of this thing.
Yeah.
He's like, well, let's just try one event. And I think we did like a Laguna Seco thing. And it was junk. Like, it just didn't like it.
Right.
And then he finally let me like, okay, do what you think you need to do.
Yeah.
So because I was still going to Apex every now and then, I went, Emil Moore's car was there.
Yeah.
So I was like, hey, Len, I need to measure Emil Moore's car up.
Yeah.
Like, all right. So I went into Emil Moore's car and I sat there and I measured the rack and pinion. And I'm like, oh man, I think I could get this to fit in an S2000.
Yeah.
And it's like, all right, cool. So it's kind of funny that it was Emil Moore's car.
Right.
Of why I ended up converting the steering rack to a RX-7 one.
Yeah.
And
were they watching you like, what is he doing?
No, because none of the Japanese guys were there because at this time it was just, they were storing it for the next event that was coming up. So I measured it and I was like, oh man, like over the 240 or, whatever else. Well, it was a front rack anyways, but out of every rack, it was the only one that was closest to me going like, I think I could fit that thing.
Yeah.
And then so I put it in there and then I found a place for the pump and I'm like, oh yeah, this will work.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, it drifts way better now. And
that wasn't the only thing you had to do, right?
No.
Okay.
It wasn't. But like it was, it was way better. Like it was something where like it wasn't so, you got to fight the wheel or anything.
Yeah.
And we're like, oh yeah, this is way better. And then after that, campaigned it. I don't remember which one. That was Houston, I think.
Okay.
There was a FD in
Houston.
Houston.
There was.
And then it was just like, oh, okay. And then whatever. And I was like, dude, John, we need more power. Like, this thing just needs more power. And so then finally he was okay with me turbocharging it. And I was like, okay, cool. I'm going to make the turbo kit. We'll go ahead and just turbocharge it.
Yeah.
And he's like, okay. He's like, I know somebody at Garrett. So he got me a turbo and then he got me everything to actually do it. And then we turbocharged it. And then we put a standalone ECU in it. And it's kind of funny because same thing. Now we're back at California Speedway.
Yeah.
And once it was turbocharged, we didn't have time to dyno it or anything.
Yeah.
And I used to do a lot of ECU tuning. So I was like, okay, you know what? We're not going to go to dyno. Let's just go straight to the track.
Okay.
I'll just figure it out. Like, you know what I mean? Like
street tune.
Yeah. So I remember being at home and I just wrote a program of
like a general,
what I thought would probably work. And
it
was nowhere near working. But I wrote something and I'm like, but it was a starting point. So I'm like, okay, cool. Let's just try this. And then we ended up going out and like John really wanted Pfeiffer to drive the car.
Yeah.
And Pfeiffer was driving his Corolla at the time.
Yeah.
And so he was out there just, driving around, on the track. And then it was just funny because it was Ernie Fixmer that he was just sitting there. And I'm like, hey, Ernie, I go, dude, can you help me like set up this car real quick?
Yeah.
And he's like, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And so he jumps in the driver's seat. And then I remember it was a big peanut track.
Okay.
Like all it was like one big peanut track.
Okay.
And I was just like, okay. I was like, hey, I'm going to tell you right now, it's not running right.
Yeah.
Like I just give me a bit and then we'll go ahead and go. And then he's going and then all of a sudden it's just like breaking up. And then it's like, I don't want to go, man. I'm like, just give me a second.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sat there, changed it. And I totally remember this because it took like 3 laps. And he's like, oh, it's starting to go now. And I'm like, okay, just give me another lap. And it's like, all right, changed it. And then he ended up going again. And then all of a sudden, like, he didn't stop. He just kept going. And I'm like, I guess it's good. I'm just trying to make changes on the fly, watching it. And I'm like, I guess it's good.
Yeah.
And it was just the funniest thing because I totally remember when he finally stopped.
Yeah.
Like, we stopped and he just sat there for like a long time, just like looking at the car going like, he's like, this thing will win FD. He's like, this thing will win FD. And I'm like, okay, that's good to hear. I go, that's really good to hear. I go, I still got a lot of stuff to do. I go, but still stuff I want to do.
Yeah.
And then so he got out of it, and I sat there and just changed a bunch of stuff. And after that, like Pfeiffer was done driving his car.
Yeah.
And keep in mind, like Pfeiffer was already just like, he didn't want anything to do with it.
Yeah.
He was just like, whatever. I'm gonna drive my Corolla. He was so used to his Corolla. It was just like, whatever. And then, but John and Ben really wanted Pfeiffer to drive the car, but you know, he wanted to drive his Corolla.
Yeah.
So literally after Ernie drove it, and then we set it up and everything, finally, you know, Pfeiffer gets out of his car and he's like, oh, go drive it.
Yeah.
It's like, all right. And then same thing. I just still have my laptop in there because I want to see how things work.
Yeah.
And then he drove it. And then same thing. He just kept going round robin and comes back. And then he goes to John. He's like, I'm driving this performance drift. And I'm like, oh, now he wants to drive it. Now he wants to drive it.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay. And then, you know, the guy went from like not wanting to help with it at all.
Right.
You know, to like, I'm driving this for Formula Drift.
Yeah.
It's like, all right. I didn't really care, you know,
Yeah.
like, because I had a lot of respect for, you know, Pfeiffer's driving. So
Yeah.
I was like, yeah. I go, dude, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And then so next thing you know, he starts showing up at my shop like, hey, so what's going on? I'm like, oh, now he wants to be part of it. I'm like, all right. So then I don't know, maybe you guys can correct me on this, but I think Irwindale was probably the first one he drove it at.
I can't remember.
Yeah.
There was an event that he drove the S2000 at. Oh, there was an event that was sponsored by Need for Speed.
He drove it at that one. Yeah.
That was not the first
you know
one,
what?
was it?
No, I think you're right.
That was the first one?
That was the first one.
It was funny because he won it in the S2000.
Yeah.
And the prize was an S2000.
Yeah.
Do you remember that?
Yeah. I remember that because Snoop Dogg was there.
Snoop Dogg was there. He was a live concert. And yeah.
I think the coolest part about that was the fact that we won the event.
Yeah.
And after that, it was like, dude, now we got to listen to Snoop Dogg.
Yeah.
Like, this is awesome.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, that was crazy. And then from there, that car will always hold kind of, for certain reasons, that car holds a lot of special memories for me. Like, it's the thing of like, it's the one that made me leave the magazine.
Mm-hmm.
And then I went back to doing what I love to do, which was working on cars.
Right.
It was a car that everybody said,
you can't do it.
You cannot do this. You cannot do this. His car will not do it.
Yeah.
And for me, it was more of just like, no. It's like, don't tell me something cannot be done. Like, anything can be done. And
right.
It did it. Like, it literally, like, it was just like, wow. He's like, not only that, is like, it's a great car. And it's funny because some of the times for testing, I was always driving the car.
Mm-hmm.
So I have to say that car made me look like I was really good.
I mean, I couldn't believe it. When I saw it driving, I was just like, what kind of black magic did they use? And then Alex would tell me, like, it's so dialed in, anyone can just jump in and make it look good.
Yeah.
And I did not believe him.
Yeah.
Because I remember driving it that first time. There's no way.
Yeah.
And even after he stopped driving it, you would see other people try and campaign the S2000. Yeah. There was the Supra Autobox one in Japan.
Yep.
The black one. And it never did well.
No.
Never.
Mm-hmm.
It always looked unstable. He couldn't get any angle when he was driving it. And then did Steph Papadakis do one too?
He had one right after
that one looked bad too.
Yeah.
It never looked like whoever's driving it was confident.
Mm-hmm. That was Steph that was driving it most of the time.
Yeah, I mean he went from drag racing to drifting, so like I get it.
But... Well, it's funny because like there was a couple people that drove. I don't know if they drove Steph's car, but a couple other people that drove our car.
Yeah,
that were just like, oh yeah, this thing's pretty awesome.
Can you tell us, like, what was it?
Honestly, I really think it was horsepower,
and
the rack and pinion did most of it.
Yeah.
But steering angle was the side of it that was just like, it didn't really have any of it.
Yeah, it didn't.
Yeah. And I want to say that, like, we've tried both 1.5-way diff and then 2-way diff.
Mm-hmm.
So the bad part about road racing at S2000 is you have to be on throttle all the time.
Yeah.
The second that you get off the throttle, that's it. It's going to spin.
Yeah.
Like if you're in the middle of a turn, it's going to spin.
Yeah.
So we went from trying 2-way diffs, and then sure enough, you just barely get off the throttle and the thing would just spin around. And we're like, oh, well, let's try the 1.5-way.
Okay.
And then try the 1.5-way, and it's like, oh, whoa, it's way more subtle.
Yeah.
When you do that. So our big thing was 1.5-way diff, and then turbocharging it in the rack, and
That's it, huh?
suspension settings. That was it. Like,
why was it so hard for everybody?
I think it was the rack. If I'm gonna
But
point
that was-
out of all of it,
That
I
was
would say
pretty
the
well
rack
known.
and
I think we all knew that you put a FD rack in there.
yeah.
But I mean, I just never saw another one where.
What was funny was I was still doing a few last stories for the magazine.
Yeah.
When I was building the S2000.
Yeah.
So I didn't just quit and then like, okay, I'm gonna build this thing.
Yeah.
I was working on it as I was actually doing it, and then this is it's kind of funny because I didn't know this, but apparently Steph got a factory Honda deal for the S2000.
Yeah.
And this is when we're all on AIM.
Yeah.
You know? So
yeah.
He's aiming me.
Yeah.
He's aiming me, and he's like, "Hey, so what did you do that S2000 make it drift and blah blah blah?" And then like I'm like, "Oh yeah, so we changed this, we changed that," and I'm a blabbermouth, so like I love what I do, so I'm not I'm gonna hide what I'm gonna do.
You pop hood.
Yeah, exactly. Like 100%. I'm like, hey, this is what I got.
Yeah.
Like, I don't care.
Yeah.
Build one. It's fun.
Yeah.
You know? And so I remember like aiming him, and he was just like, oh, okay, so what rack did you use?
Yeah.
And at the same time, right when I'm about to reply to him, Alan from Sparko, he aimed me. He's like, hey, dude, I just want to let you know, Steph got a factory Honda deal for drifting. And I'm like,
tell him the wrong year.
Oh, I did. I was just like, oh, but I'm stuck because I got 2 aims up right now. Like, I used the FC rack. And I was like,
yes.
Oh man, like, that sucks. He's gonna figure it out. You know what I mean? Like, and don't get me wrong, like Steph's a smart guy. He'll figure it out on his own regardless.
Yeah.
And then I was just like, damn, dude, like, okay, whatever.
Yeah.
And then he got it and he drove it. And, I'll say he's a better driver than me, but I don't know. I guess just wasn't up to standard. So that's where Tanner came in.
Yeah.
But yeah, I totally remember that because he was picking my brain on that one.
Yeah.
And I was just like, damn it. And it was just so funny because both of those aims popped up.
Right.
Like, and I'm like, holy cow, dude, this sucks. Like, because I was already spilling the beans.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until like Alan popped in later and it was like, hey, he has a drift deal.
It was meant to be. Like, there's a reason Alan IM'd you at that very exact moment.
It must have been, but like, I just totally remember that. I'm like, whoa, that's crazy. And then, I mean, like, if you ask me, like, he shadowed everything that I actually did.
Yeah.
I mean, in drag racing, he was always really good. So it was only a matter of time before he really figured out the whole drift side of things.
Yeah.
But I just find it funny that it went from S2000 and the 350Z.
Yeah.
And then at the time, we already got on the podium with Calvin for the G35.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I want to say after that year is when Tanner jumped on.
Yeah.
And then same thing. It came down to, well, actually, I guess you could say it was really Tanner going like, hey, so what'd you do about the rear in that, G35?
No, it's because Steph told Tanner, he's like, oh, he burned me last time. You go ask.
No, I know it's not that.
Yeah.
Because the Scion deal.
Yeah.
When the Scion TC thing went off.
Yeah.
Like, I remember this specifically because Steph just straight out, he didn't even try to hide it. He just said like, okay, we got a Scion deal. What did you do to that car?
Yeah.
And then at this point I was like, oh yeah, just try to keep it on the down low. Don't go too far outside of the gray on this deal.
Yeah.
Like, don't go really crazy because it's just going to ruin it for it, for both the cars.
Right.
And sure enough, like, he went over the moon on this one.
Yeah.
Like, he went NASCAR V8 and all the other stuff. And
yeah.
I was like, damn it. I was like, but at that time, I want to say like mid-season, I wasn't even doing any RS-R stuff anyways. Yeah. So it didn't really matter. But at the same time, I was just like, oh man, you got to just right under the radar, for a little bit.
Yeah.
Because the whole Scion thing was just already an anomaly.
Yeah, let's talk about that since you brought it up. So you built a Scion TC. Yeah. For those that are too young to know, Scion used to be a Toyota brand.
That's everybody.
They had a car called a TC, and they don't make it anymore. But I don't know what it was in Japan. Was it? I forgot what it was called.
So that's where I found this out, and this was the same thing. Remember, I was telling you like with manufacturers at the magazine, I played dumb.
Yeah.
So at the magazine, they do these things called long leads, which are car manufacturers invite you out to test drive their new car.
Yeah.
They wine and dine you. They do all that kind of stuff. But then dinner, they always make sure that somebody from, whatever the manufacturer is, Nissan, Toyota, whatever it is, they're always sitting with you at dinner. Well, I got really lucky because I went on, before I left the magazine, I went on the Scion TC long lead, and it was in Washington, D.C.
Okay.
So we had to cruise around and brand new Scions that aren't even, Scion TCs that aren't even out yet. And then sure enough, for dinner, they seat me with one of the engineers from Toyota.
Nice.
Toyota Scion, I guess you could say. And I don't remember his last name, but it was this guy Chuck, and he's been there forever.
Yeah.
And then so he kind of said the thing of like, he's like, well, this chassis has been around for a long time. It's like, in what?
Yeah.
He's like, well, in Japan, it's called a Caldina.
Caldina, okay.
And it's all-wheel drive.
Yes.
And I was like, whoa. I go, I did not know this.
Yeah.
It's like, how much of the chassis is a Caldina? He's like, 100% of it is a Toyota Caldina. And it was all-wheel drive. And I'm like, okay. So I left it at that. And keep in mind, at the time that I did this, the S2000 wasn't even, like, I was still at the magazine.
Yeah.
I never left.
Yeah.
And I wasn't even building the RS-R S2000 yet.
Right.
But I always remembered that.
You always remembered that.
Yeah, and I always remembered that. And then it kind of sucks because it's the one thing that I really wish I would have just took the reins and did it on my own.
Okay.
Like
maybe
the S2000? No.
Oh, okay.
S2000
just like
was 100%.
Your own, like campaigning your
my
own
own
team.
My own team. I really wish I did that as my own team.
Okay.
Because that was the one tidbit that I had that nobody else actually had.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, like if I was smart, if I wasn't such just a hands-on builder, and all I wanted to do was build it, like if I was more of like, if I was good, like Steph,
a businessman,
that knows how to market it, then I should have did it, but I didn't, and then so I just remember now we fast forward, it's the S2000. Now I'm traveling with the team, and I was like, and at the time, Formula Drift, you were not allowed to convert a front-wheel drive car to a rear-wheel drive car.
Right.
It was illegal.
It was illegal in the rule book.
You can do an all-wheel drive car.
Yes.
And convert it to a rear-wheel drive car. Because remember Rich Rutherford?
Yeah.
He had the Evo. And he competed in that. And so I just held this whole tidbit of information in my back pocket forever. And of course,
not knowing that it would ever be useful.
We were probably like with RS-R and getting drunk somewhere.
Yeah.
And then I was just like, hey, I go, you know what? I know a loophole in the Formula Drift rulebook.
Yeah.
That can get that Scion TC to run.
Why were they even interested in the TC?
Who?
RS-R.
No, they weren't.
They weren't. You guys were just brought it up out of nowhere.
The interest came with Scion, how much marketing they do.
Yes.
Just period.
Yes. Yeah. And so just to give it a little context, Scion was kind of like a younger generation kind of lifestyle brand for Toyota, right? Mm-hmm. And so they were heavily marketing towards kids, like the younger generation, and it was not like a mom or dad car. It was something you want to get for your first car when you're younger. So the marketing definitely showed that through the music that they were playing, kind of like.
But they were sponsoring front wheel drive drag racing at the time too.
Okay.
So like they had.
That's right. They had Christian Rado.
Yeah. They had Christian Rado. They had Kenny Tran. They had factory. Like they were into it. Like, they were 100% into it.
They were spending money on motorsports.
But the only in that they did not have
was drifting
because they did not make a rear wheel drive car.
Yeah.
So it was this thing of like, God, they're spending that much money.
Yeah.
Like they can get into it.
Yeah.
And then I remember just at a dinner, and it's like, no, he's like, I know the loophole to get in there.
Yeah.
For Scion to jump into this thing.
Yeah.
And I explained it to Ben and I explained it to John. I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
It's based off of this chassis in Japan. 100%. I got that from the engineer.
Yeah.
It's like, so if it's an all-wheel drive car, you can convert an all-wheel drive car to rear-wheel drive.
Right.
And, that's the end. And sure enough, like, I didn't know, like, I don't know. They kind of didn't put me in that loop of it. They just knew I can build it.
Yeah.
And it came down to where, like, they must have been talking to Scion saying like, oh yeah, hey, we can get your car in there, blah, blah, blah. And then when I heard, the money talk, I was just like, whoa, like this is crazy.
You
dude.
missed the opportunity.
Oh yeah, 100%. I'm
Yeah.
like, oh my God, because they wanted in.
Yeah.
And then they got in, and sure enough, like I was happy because one, like I was like, see, I told you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
But I'm still broke. You know what I mean?
I know.
But at the same time, it came down to where like, John and Ben said like, okay, build us the car.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, yeah, let's do this. I'm down. And so sure enough, they get a brand new TC, I put it up. And it's really funny because all the chassis points that the engineer I was talking about, they were literally stamped into the whole chassis.
Yeah.
But there were no bolt holes.
Okay, so you just had to drill the holes.
So I was like, whoa. I go, holy crap, it's totally made to fit this subframe and everything. It was 100% made to be a rear-wheel drive car.
Did you use Caldina parts, or did you use one-off parts, or
no,
parts for another car?
I think we just decided to just try to take it I'm sorry. The subframe. The rear subframe we did use.
Okay.
But, I mean, it had a S13 diff in it.
Yeah.
And,
easily accessible things if you needed to replace it.
Yeah. And the FD tech at the time wasn't Kevin. It was you guys remember that Randy guy?
I don't remember.
Okay,
Randy.
he was an SCCA. He came from SCCA.
Oh, it was those days.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then so Jim was, and everybody else was just like, okay. He's like, this got approved, but you must turn on every single picture of what you're going to cut in this car. And blah,
you
blah,
had to
blah,
approve
blah.
it before you started working on it.
No, it got approved that Scion's going to jump in it because I found this loophole in that rule book. Yeah. And they're like, okay, it got approved, but whatever you do to this thing, you must send it to Randy.
Yeah.
So he can approve what you're going to cut out of this car.
Right.
I'm like, okay. I was like, okay, so I got to get kind of extravagant with this. And he's like, oh, and then Randy sends an email. He's like, all right, let me know where you're going to do this thing. I need to see tape measurements and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, okay. So literally I put a tape measure from the firewall all the way to the rear end. I'm like, I'm going to cut this.
Yeah.
And he's like, no, that's not going to happen. And so the tape measure just started getting shorter and shorter and shorter until where he finally, it got to a tunnel.
Yeah.
For the transmission. He's like, okay, you can cut from there.
Yeah.
He's like, but you cannot cut any farther back from that.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay. I go, that's what I really wanted, but I wanted to test the waters.
You had to ask.
Back. Yeah.
Had to ask.
And then so so it was really cool because it's really weird. I'm happy about the project, but at the same time, I kind of dropped the ball on the project.
Yeah.
But I was happy about it because, it came to fruition. And we built it. Yeah. And I just remember pulling it out of the transport. Yeah. And it was just like the craziest thing because this was at, I don't know how many years they did Long Beach Grand Prix.
I don't know.
I mean, the FD one. But it was early on. So it was like season opener at this point. Yeah. And I remember pulling it out of the thing and just everyone's looking. And it was nuts because I remember I was driving it out. Yeah. And I was pulling it out and just like everybody's just trying to stick their head under the
dude.
thing and just like I'm like, wow, this is a lot bigger deal than I thought it was going to be.
Everyone, I remember, from an outsider's perspective, when when RS-R did the press release, everyone was talking about it. Yeah. It was the first car where someone converted front wheel drive to rear wheel drive. Yeah. And then everyone was talking about, it's not really rear wheel drive because it's all wheel drive in Japan, blah, blah, blah. But it was the talk of the town. It was. It was kind of a cool feeling though. I'm not gonna lie. Because I was just like, wow, dude,
of course. That was you.
Screw you guys. I figured out your rule book. I figured out your rule book. Yeah. It felt so cool.
At what point did you guys figure out that Ken was gonna drive that car?
I figured it out early on. Because I already knew that Ken was gonna drive it. I mean, I don't know how that deal transpired. But I knew that early on that
and I think that added to just how it blew everyone out of the water because Ken was the perfect spokesmodel for Scion. I think so.
It's still to this day.
I was it's so cool that he's still with Toyota after all this time, but it started with that. Oh yeah. And he was the demographic. And
Like it just
all
it
of
made
it.
100% sense. Like
Yeah.
I was just like, wow, like, this is a cool deal to be part
Yeah.
of. Like I really thought it was cool to be part of.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, like, and then the fact that Ken's still at Toyota is like, that's really cool.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
You needed your finder's fee.
Yeah. There's some.
I wish I would have took that deal on my own.
Yeah.
Like I said,
Yeah,
dude, I
yeah.
just
Coulda,
love
shoulda,
building.
woulda.
I just love building stuff. Is
Yeah.
what it was. So it's like I don't think about it monetarily so much.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I just want to build something different.
Yeah.
It's like cool.
That's why you're so good. Like you doing
I like to think that, but my wallet is empty.
You need a business manager. You need an agent.
You need an agent.
You know?
If I had something like that, rather than trying to do it on my own.
Yeah.
100%. It goes for every one of those drivers and everybody else too.
Yeah.
Like if they had somebody running that, they can concentrate on the one thing instead of a bunch of other things.
Yeah.
It's a special skill set to be able to run a team, work on the car.
It does.
And there's a lot of guys like Chris Forsberg or Von Gittin who are doing all of it.
Yeah.
Not everyone can do that. Not everyone can be a
It's
good
not
owner
sustainable.
and a good driver and a good mechanic and a good like publicist. And
that's, I mean, like the money side of it, I can't fathom how that is. I have been lucky enough to where I did get to run a team and I ran it the way I wanted to run it and everything. And I didn't have to pay a dime.
Nice.
You know what I mean? Like it's that was luck.
Yeah. So Gary, you mentioned the Falken G35 that you built for Calvin Wan.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about that build?
That was probably the first Falken build that I did.
Okay.
So that one was actually pretty cool because it was a car that, I don't know, they literally, like, the way that Falken was doing it was crazy because, like, they were just buy a car and build it.
Just send it. Brand new car off the showroom.
Exactly.
Send it straight to you.
Yeah. And then, so it was a new, just different thing, but at the same time,
no one had built a G35 for drifting. Yeah.
And for me, the one thing that worried me was the wheelbase. I was like, oh, this is a long car.
It's a little bit long.
Yeah. So, my closest thing that I can come to it was Nomakin's R34.
Was it that long that you can compare it to his 34 sedan?
Yeah, 100%. Because
Really?
Nomakin was already campaigning his R34.
Yeah.
Well, he had the ER34.
Yes.
Yeah. So he was comparing those two. Yeah, because the wheelbase, I was always looking at Nomakin's car, going like, "Holy crap! It's like a limo. Like, it's crazy the way that thing moves. Like, how do you get it to transition faster? Like, you just can't. Like, it's a long wheelbase, and I'm gonna guess on the number, but I want to say it's like 112 or 100 and something.
The wheelbase?
Yeah, it was really long.
No way.
Yeah, it was really long.
So in comparison, I think a S13 is what, like
10 something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Low 100s.
Yeah. So it was a challenge.
I didn't realize it's such a long car.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, don't quote me on that. I think that's what it was.
Okay.
But it was a really long car, and I never worked with anything like that.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, it was the VQ engine. So it's like, oh, what are we going to do? And then
and this was 03, so the car was pretty new. And there wasn't a lot of VQ knowledge then, right?
No. So it was a learning process again. Yeah. And then so building the car, I just had to go to people I knew from, when I worked at the magazine.
Yeah.
So
I'm sorry, I said 03, but it was 05, right? Or 04, maybe 04 when you were building it. 04, 05.
I want to say that the car was not a 05 because we had the crappier transmission.
Okay.
So we had the one that broke a lot, which was the earlier model.
Okay.
So whatever that one was.
They gave you overstock.
They bought the December car.
Seriously? Yeah, I know. The one that's cheaper because the new one came out. No, seriously. How did Falken get the car? Did they seriously just go to a dealership, buy a car, or did they?
I'm not sure on that particular one.
Okay.
I know the Saturn Sky. Yeah, they just literally
they bought it at retail.
Yeah.
Or fleet. That's a fleet vehicle.
A fleet, yeah. We're Falken. We need a fleet vehicle.
I think the G35 was the same thing, but when I got it, it was set up to just do like a demo.
Uh-huh.
So somebody already got in the interior and they ripped it all out.
Okay.
And they put a roll cage in it.
Oh, wow.
But we cut all that stuff out.
Of course.
So.
Because it was no good.
Oh yeah. It was pretty bad. Like.
Hey, have you ever looked at a monkey bars cage?
That's old school.
That's really old school.
Yeah, I remember
those
that.
cages were so bad.
They look like shopping carts.
Yeah. It's just like
the way that they bent them and everything.
Yeah.
I was just like, wow.
Bends everywhere, like bars in front of your face.
Yeah, I totally remember those. And I'm like, so this isn't racing anything, right?
Yeah, I hope not.
Yeah. So I do remember looking at those ones.
Yeah.
But it wasn't that bad. Like
Okay.
Calvin's wasn't that bad, but it was just like, I don't know. When you do a ground up build, start from scratch, do
Okay.
your own thing.
Yeah.
So we ended up, starting from scratch, and then it was pretty cool because Calvin kept coming down to the shop, and then, he would help us, and then everybody from Gretty to Mackin to AM actually helped us a lot with ECU. So there were no ECUs really for that car,
Right.
so that was literally the first car that they actually really did that was somewhat VQ related.
Okay.
That was standalone, and then turbocharged too. So it was a cool car, but it was a very long car.
Yeah.
It was just so long that it looked lazy. So we had to
Okay.
just try to figure out what we're gonna do with it.
Yeah.
And I think with Calvin and then me and then just everybody else, we just kept working at it. And then I remember coming up with this crazy like toe suspension thing.
Okay.
And I remember getting called out by Nick from Falken.
Yeah.
Because it looked really weird when I was sitting there doing a burnout.
Yeah.
He's like, dude, he's like, something's loose on the back. I'm like, it's not loose.
Yeah.
Don't worry about it. You know what I mean? But you're trying to tell Nick that. And
Yeah.
it's just like, oh man, like, he has his people he has to look towards of like, don't f anything up.
Yeah.
And, but it was just like a toe thing. Like all it was a bump steer thing.
Okay.
And we put that on there and it worked. And we're like, oh yeah, this actually works really good. Like to get it to transition faster.
What did you do?
I just messed with the bump steer like really bad.
Okay.
To where, what can I say? Like it looked like the tire went in and out
Oh.
a ton,
Okay.
depending on if it was sitting down or if it was up in the air.
Right.
It would butterfly.
Okay.
Like
Just kind of
really
like magnified
bad. Yeah.
like that naturally happens when a car
Exactly.
squats or goes up, the toe naturally goes in or out. You like
made
magnified it.
nuts,
Extreme.
dude, like really crazy.
How do you do that?
I just tack weld something and then play with it and watch it move and then keep doing that and then and
Tackle
it
more
worked.
stuff?
So at the time of that car,
Yeah.
in the beginning era, I can say that's what we did,
Okay.
and then it worked to where like it would transition it way faster
Interesting.
and
it
everything
didn't
else.
affect it while I was doing other things like mid transition or like when it was. I mean, but obviously your alignment's changing a lot.
Yeah,
Right? When the car
it is.
squats.
It is. So it's like I said, it worked to a point.
Okay. Yeah.
But like following or something like that, it made it that much harder.
Okay.
So yeah, it was really wacky, and then that's kind of these days it's out the door.
Can't do
But,
that.
Like you wouldn't be able to get away with that. But at the time, everything was a lot slower.
Pretty new.
Yeah, pretty new.
The
So,
rule book was a lot more open because they haven't learned
Yeah.
all the things that people are doing.
so you can get away with it.
Yeah.
It wasn't a problem.
Yeah.
Like I mean, at that time, like at that era, it was everybody just wanted like, oh, give me a load of toe in,
Yeah.
and then it worked. Now you can't do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it got him to the podium.
Yeah. Yeah. So
It was the first import car to win first place in a round.
It was like, cause at the time, like, I mean, I don't know, what were we in? Like 2 years, 3 years deep? I don't even know.
I think it was just 1 year deep. It was 05.
I think it was
It was
05.
because it started in 04.
Was it really?
I think it was 05.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
we
No.
just talked to
I know
him.
what it is. Okay. I know what it is then. It was the fact that everything that was winning was domestic.
Yes.
Yeah. That's what it was.
The
Yeah.
Formula D was
Mhm.
dominated by
Yeah.
a Viper
and-
Yeah.
or a GTO.
Exactly. So it was kind of a cool, proud moment.
Yeah.
For, I guess you could say both me and
Yeah.
then Calvin, because
Of
Calvin is
course.
his hometown.
That's his
Yeah.
hometown.
And then
Yeah.
and then for me, because the fact that it was the bragging rights of, it's first import car,
Yeah.
which, it grew up in Japan.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, oh
Right.
man.
And not to mention, like, where you started with domestics,
Yeah.
and then you got into imports, and
Mhm.
imports were always the underdog
Yeah.
with drag racing,
Mhm.
right?
Oh,
so
sorry. Yeah. No, that's exactly what it was.
Yeah.
So to me, it was a thing of like, it was a proud shining moment
Yeah.
of, oh, well, finally an
Yeah.
import actually made it.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
yeah,
And I find it even funny that it was Tanner in an S13 that Calvin beat.
yeah,
Yes.
I was like, oh, whoa, that's nuts.
Yeah.
Grassroots rally driver.
yeah, right.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah, that was kind of cool.
Love that.
So you also mentioned that you worked on Orido's Supra and Aristo, and I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
tell us a little bit about that.
Okay, so the Aristo, I didn't really travel with it,
Okay.
but it came, and this is actually, I think, when he competed in Formula Drift, he competed with that car, but his roll cage and everything wasn't FD standards. So he had the car shipped over to my place, and then we had to take everything out. And then,
Was that because of your relationship with RS-R?
Yeah,
Okay.
because the Supra, actually, okay, if we're gonna go a little bit farther back, when he had the RS-R Supra, that's the really kind of car that he first came here with D1,
Yeah.
when he actually wanted to compete.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because for people that don't remember, he came out of retirement, and it was
Yep. Mm-hmm.
It was kind of crazy because Orido was always around doing option video and stuff like that, and like
Always a judge.
always a judge, and we
yeah.
had really never, unless you go really far back to like early '90s VHS, you don't really see Orido drifting. So to hear that he like retired,
Yeah.
it's kind of interesting because you're just like, well, okay,
Kind of grew up watching the guy.
yeah, I grew up watching the guy.
Mhm.
He's like, as far as I've known, he's always been retired.
Yeah.
Like, how is he gonna do now while we're seeing all these really great drivers?
Yeah.
And so we were always curious, like, okay, he's coming out of retirement, is he going to be any good?
Mm-hmm.
And then he came out in the RS-R Supra, and he killed. He was so good.
He wanted it, like, you can tell he just wanted to, like, I'm not gone.
Yeah.
I am here to stay.
Yeah.
And that was, so the behind the scenes side of it was really crazy.
Yeah.
Like, it was to the point where so they had the car at RS-R, and then they brought it over to my place because I didn't know that. I guess he crashed it.
Okay.
And then they're like, oh yeah, I guess the hardest thing to find was a right hand drive rack. They're like, oh my god, we broke the rack. We need a right hand drive rack.
So is this when he crashed it at Irwindale?
Yeah.
That was a gnarly crash.
Yeah, it was.
And that actually was it you trying to fix it before the actual event, or what was that?
Oh yeah, no, all of it was literally like
right after qualifying when he crashed.
Yeah.
So did you see that?
No, it wasn't. I had to fix it before qualifying. Because if I remember
Did he crash
right,
it during practice?
In practice he crashed it. That's what it was.
Okay, and
Yeah.
then did he crashed it again during qualifying?
Yeah.
Okay,
did.
so we'll get there. We'll get there. I saw that, and we'll get there. But like, continue with your story.
Yeah, so it was crazy because he ended up crashing it, and then that's when John and Ben called me. They're like, "Oh, hey, we need help with this thing, blah blah blah." And then it's like, okay, and they knew they couldn't fix it over at RS-R, so then they brought it over to my shop.
Yeah,
and the guy that owned the shop that worked on it was boss something or other.
Mm-hmm. I don't know.
In Japan.
Okay.
Whatever it was his main guy or whatever. So they all came over so that we could actually work on the car. And oh man, it was on a dolly and everything.
Yeah.
They're like, oh yeah, the rack is broken. This is broken. Like intercooler, everything was demolished on it.
Yeah.
So we ended up like fixing it the first time we fixed it. And
Okay.
then he was like, oh yeah, he's like, I need more steering angle and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, oh.
This is from Orido or?
From Orido.
Okay.
Yeah. And he's like, oh, I need more steering angle. I'm like, oh, I can make this thing. and
Yeah.
then it'll give you more steering. I was like, oh yeah, he goes, yeah, do that. It's like, all right. So then I made this part for him, and then sure enough, he goes out there again, and he's in practice, and then he crashes it again.
Yeah.
And then oh, so you know what? Actually, I'm sorry. I got to take a couple steps back. I want to say that this was practice, and then did he crash it again in practice? I don't remember because he came back twice.
He did. I'm trying to remember.
How does that make you feel? Like, you know, you all this hard work, right? And you're one-offing things.
I don't know. I like to win, so it's like whatever to make it win.
Need?
Yeah. But I know that one of the things that he complained about was the steering angle, so I made something for him. It's like, okay.
Was that because of the crash, or he was just like, oh, this guy's good. Let me ask him to do more things?
No. It was before the crash. So he wanted more steering angle, and I made him this part.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, cool. And then he goes out, and the next thing you know, he crashes. I hope it wasn't my part.
Yeah.
But he crashes, but he was going hard. Like,
oh, yeah. Like, he had something to prove. You could see it.
I mean, like, at the time, he was riding the wall, like, pretty crazy.
That's what I want to get into. Because in the qualifying run, he rode the wall like no one has ever seen up until that point.
Exactly.
He rode the wall.
Everybody was mid-level.
Mid-level, trying to get close. He was on the wall the whole way around the bank, lit up the whole bank with smoke. It's going too fast, by the way.
Obviously.
But it was the first time I had seen it, and now that it kind of set the bar because that's what you see now. Everyone runs like that.
It has to be on the ragged edge. Like, it has to be on the ragged edge. And then, so sure enough, he ended up hitting the wall, and he's like, oh, okay. And then, so he left the parts that I actually made on it. So I was like, okay, I feel like, you know, there was a language barrier. And he's like, oh, he left the parts on there. I was like, okay, cool. And then I remember specifically, like, him and then his engineer guy looking at, like, they were staring at the diff. They pulled it out. They're like, oh, you know, whatever in Japanese. They just couldn't figure it out. And then, they were like, oh yeah. I was like, John, what are they trying to figure out? He's like, it's a 1.5 way diff. He's like, he wants a 2-way, but we didn't have a 2-way. And I was like, oh. I go, well, if we cut this part right here and cut this part right here,
you can make it a 2-way.
It'll be a 2-way. And then he's just like, John explains it to the guy that owns the shop in Japan. And he's like, oh yeah. He's like, just do it like this. He's like, oh, Gary said do it like this, blah, 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 blah. It's like, okay. And he's like, no. And he looks at it more, and he's just like, oh, yeah. He's like, yeah, just do that. He's like, can you do that here? And I'm like, yeah, I can do that here. He's like, all right. So, and it was me and Danny, Jensen's brother.
Danny Oda,
We did it. And we're like, oh, yeah, just do it. It's like, all right. We did it. And then next thing you know, we got the car back up and running. He's like, oh, dude, the car's way better. He's like, car's way better. And then I think that's in qualifying when he did that. Just went way too big.
It was mind blowing watching that run.
And then I remember that because I remember the car coming, and it was just, he didn't like it when it got shipped over. And then changing it, and then having to change it again. And it's like, okay, try this. But that was crazy. Like,
it was really crazy. It was so crazy that he finished the run. He crashed pretty hard.
And it came back out.
He came back. But like just seeing the expression on his face, like it looked like he won anyway.
Yeah. He's an interesting guy to work with. Even like what was it, the JGTC one? What was that one? California Speedway.
GT Live.
GT Live.
Yes,
same thing. Like, I think that one he was driving the S15 or S15 or S14. He was driving one of those ones. I don't remember.
For JGTC, not the drifting side.
No, the drifting side of it.
Well, I don't remember.
He competed in the drifting side of it.
I can't remember what he was driving.
I guess he didn't qualify. I don't remember.
Yeah, I don't remember either.
I guess he didn't qualify. But other than working on that car for him at GT Live, like the other one was the Supra, and then the Orido, which was, I mean, that literally needed a roll cage change.
It was just demos.
No, he was competing with the Orido.
That's right, he did.
Yeah, but I wasn't traveling with the team at that time. So it was just like, oh, hey, can you do this real quick? Yeah, no problem. So that was it. And I guess he did pretty, I don't know, did he do good?
I really don't remember.
I don't think so.
Yeah. Okay.
But, I mean, I feel like everything that you've talked about is so like roses, right? Feel good.
Oh, it is. Yeah.
But then we go to a different car you worked on, and it can't all be roses because I asked the heavy hitting questions. So tell me about maybe when it didn't go as planned, or just, I
already
nice.
know what you're getting at.
Yeah. I think, because I mean, come on, we got to keep it real.
Yeah. Okay. Well, okay. I know what you're getting at. You're getting at the Daigo thing. So
I am.
It's the first year, everything was great.
Well, go back. Explain, introduce. What car is this? Who's the driver? What series?
So it was Robbie Nishida and Daigo Saito.
Mm-hmm.
And then they had to deal with Achilles Tires
Yep.
that came in.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really weird the way that worked out, because I was literally like third party on this thing. And all I was a guy that was going to build Robbie's roll cage.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sorry, not roll cage, like build Robbie's car and then hand it off to somebody else. And then they were going to finish the car.
Okay.
And then that was it.
Yeah.
Like, that's all I was supposed to do. But me, like, I got to see, like what I actually helped on. Yeah. It has to do good. Like, it has to do good. It has to do good. So, like, the Bridges Racing guys ended up taking over, they handed the car to me and we did all the fab work.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, it went to Bridges Racing. And then they had to actually finish everything else off. Brakes, whatever it was, like dropping the engine in, everything.
Mm-hmm.
So honestly, like where Bridges was, it wasn't that far from my shop, but I'm a fab shop. So everything I was doing was fabrication wise. I finished it, got paid, wiped my hands, walk away.
Yeah.
So just out of curiosity, like literally I was like, oh, let me see how things are going over there.
Yeah.
So I drove by, and then this was like, I mean, I'm not even joking. It was probably Robbie's car was maybe about like 2 months before the opening event.
Yeah.
And it was still bare metal. It was still like, it had an engine in it, but like set up as a mock-up.
Yeah.
And then like, it was just, I was just like, you got like, dude, anxiety just was like, oh my God, like this is crazy. You guys aren't going to do this. There's no way that you're going to do this. Yeah. And you guys remember Hung from Baker?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay. So it was a lot of Hung's friends from Baker that were coming over, or not from Baker, but a lot of his friends were coming over to actually just be helping hands, not get paid, not doing any of that stuff.
Yeah.
And help. But like nothing still was getting done because
that's not enough.
Everybody, well, I mean, there has to be a leadership side
Too
of
many
it.
cooks.
Right. Yeah. Like there has to be like, do this,
like
do this.
a project
blah, blah, blah,
manager who oversees everything.
Yeah, but project manager wanted to do everything.
Yeah.
And
himself.
I'm like, oh my God, dude. I'm like, I've never, like, I literally would go in his shop and then it was, he was kind of lucky because he had cable TV in there.
Yeah.
So they were watching History Channel. And I'm like, you guys got to finish this fucking car, dude. Like, why? Like, I don't get it. Like, like it's not even my shop. And I was pissed. I was just like, no, you got, how come you're not doing this? How come and I didn't even know these people.
Yeah.
Which is really funny because now, because of this whole Achilles and Robbie and Daigo side of it, these are some of my best friends.
Yeah.
Like they're guys that I still hang out with, barbecue with, talk to, and everything.
Love it.
Like, it was nuts. And I was just like, this is not going to happen. Yeah. And then I remember jumping over there, and then Brian was trying to do something and everybody else was sitting around. And I'm like, no. I'm like, what are you doing? He's like, oh, I was going to do the brake lines, but Brian wanted me to do this or whatever. I mean, and so they weren't doing anything. And I just, no, you go over there, you do this, you do this. Hey, what are you doing? Yeah. Hey, you go over there and do this. You go over there and do this. And it was because of the fact that it was something that I initially did the fab work on, but I wanted to see it run. Yeah. And seeing it in the condition, I'm like, it's not going to make it. Yeah. Like, this sucks, dude. Like, I got to see this thing run. Yeah. Yep. So maybe about like another month went by. And then at this point, Robbie was flying in. Yeah. And then Daigo was like, oh, like, where's my car going to be?
Yeah.
It's like, oh, Brian calls me. He's like, oh, hey, can Daigo and those guys work on your car over there? It's like, yeah, for sure. I had the room. So they brought it in the shop. And then at the same time, they were trying to finish Robbie's car, and it wasn't getting anywhere near done.
Mm-hmm.
So the next thing you know, both cars end up at my shop. And
Yeah.
I'm like, dude, if I'm going to do this, you got to pay me to do this. But at the same time, this is stupid. I cannot believe that.
Good for you.
This is how this is getting around. And then, so at that point, we started building Robbie's car. Oh, yeah. And then not to mention that the S13 that he was racing in, I think that was the year right before, Brian already rented it out. And it's like,
so there's no
Robbie's,
backup.
Yeah, there was no backup.
Yeah.
And then Robbie's car wasn't done. So he rented it out to Dean Kearney.
Okay.
And it was just like, well, Robbie's car's not done, dude.
Yeah.
I'm like, you're not going to finish that thing.
Yeah.
So then now Dean's car's in Brian's shop. And then Robbie and Daigo's car in my shop. I'm like, we got a lot of work to do.
What was the state of Daigo's car when it came?
Daigo's car was almost done.
Okay.
Like literally, like he was smart. He made sure his was ready to go.
Okay.
And he had small issues. So literally it was me going in there just like, oh yeah, this is how I do it. Just take it off like this or do this, do that. And then he had like water leaks and all kinds of other small stuff. It's like, oh yeah, we could do that. We could fix this. We could fix that. So it was all just more small repairs on Daigo's car. And that was it.
Mm-hmm.
Robbie's car was a whole nother thing.
Yeah.
Like it was to the point where it was not going to make it. And then it actually didn't make it for Long Beach. But I mean, it sucks because I did everything I possibly could to actually get this thing running.
Right.
And then it was one keystroke away.
Yeah.
To make a tech day.
Mm-hmm.
And it was one thing I did not know about the ECU. And then I remember my buddy that works for the ECU company. I was like, he's like, oh, did you click on this? I'm like, no way.
Oh.
Clicked it and then fired right
Dang
up. I'm
it.
like, you're not going to believe this.
Yeah.
It's like, it's ready, but I don't want you to wall it up at Long Beach.
Right.
Daigo's car, same thing. Like went out, had issues and came back to my shop. Kept coming back for small issues.
Yeah.
Nothing major.
Yeah.
And then after that event, it came down to we're like, no, we're going to leave our cars over here. And then Gary will do the work on these cars.
Yeah.
And then Daigo's car ended up being like, I mean, he kept crashing it. So it literally got rebuilt. Like we ended up tearing the whole thing down and then having to rebuild that whole car. And then Robbie's car had like the issues of what Daigo's car had at Long Beach, which was small teething issues by the time it got to Atlanta. So we ended up fixing Robbie's car after Atlanta. But at this time, the car has stayed in the East Coast.
Right.
So we had to fly out.
Oh, man.
Like every time to
use someone else's shop and all that.
To put the Band-Aids on.
Yeah.
And that was it. And then, so we did that with those cars, like just Band-Aids, and that was it. And it was like, oh man, I can't wait till these cars come back.
Mm-hmm.
And then at this point, I want to say mid-season maybe. It was probably mid-season that me and Brian went in on the shop. We like split a shop.
Okay.
It was like really my shop because he was never there, but I didn't care because I had extra space.
Yeah.
So we ended up like that became the home, and every car needed to be rebuilt.
Yeah.
Like so, we just kept rebuilding them, and then that's how 2012 went.
Okay.
And we ended up winning the championship, and it was like I was like, wow, I cannot believe these things did as well as they did.
Right.
You know.
And Daigo's car was something that a lot of us were in the US had never seen a build at that level.
Yeah.
Right? The horsepower numbers were insane, right? It was it was a 2J, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Was
nitrous.
1,000 horsepower? What was it?
Okay. I want to say after we dynoed it, everybody kept saying 1,200 horsepower.
Yeah.
1,200 horsepower.
Yeah.
When by the time we got it off of HPS dyno, it was like just short of 1,400 horsepower.
Oh my God.
Like, but it blew up. I'm not gonna lie, it blew up on the dyno.
Okay.
But it was just short of 1,400 horsepower.
Yeah.
Like it was making power. It was like, whoa, this is crazy.
Right.
And then it had a lot of power. And the nitrous is kind of what did a lot of it.
It did a lot of it.
Yeah. So it was, I would say horsepower wise, it was new to me on a drift car.
Yeah.
But
You
setup
were only
wise,
seeing that on like drag race cars.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But you weren't seeing it run over and over and over, right?
Mm-hmm.
How many shots nitrous?
I never really pulled the jets out to look at it, but if I'm going to take a guess, it was maybe about like 80 horsepower per cylinder. So what is that? Like
3. Oh.
You suck at math.
Times 6, yeah.
8 times 6 is
240 horsepower? Is that what it is?
No. What is
80 times 6.
Too many beers.
4.
I don't know.
480.
That's
480.
Yeah, right around there. But it was a dry setup, so it was a lot of power.
Yeah.
Like, and that was just like the way he had it set up is when it would kick on and then when it would turn off. But we did Robbie's car the same way, but we did a single on Robbie's.
Okay.
But same thing. All it was just to get the tires to spin and to get it to spool.
Yeah.
And that was it. And it worked, Yeah, it was nuts. That type of horsepower was really crazy. But what was crazy about that was the setup, like the mentality of like did you ever get to drive any of the J cars? Like
I got to drive the only Japanese car I got to drive was the RS-R S14.
Okay, so you did, because that was my experience. That was my experience too.
Okay.
And it was so different.
Yeah.
Compared to how a US car is set up. And I remember sitting down with Orido, and we sat there and talked about it for a long time, because I was like, I can't drive that car, like your guys' car. But the RS-R S2000, I can drive that thing all day long. Like it's easy to drive. And then the setups of whenever any one of the J cars, even Hayashida, like their alignment settings, their everything, shock settings, whatever it was 100% different from what we always did traditionally here.
I've never talked to anybody about this, but if you look at, do you remember the D1 yearbooks? I don't know. And they would list all the specs. And you were looking at like
spring rates.
I would look at and then they had the alignment settings. And I was looking at the alignment settings of like someone who I really looked up to, like Kumakubo. And then I would look at maybe like I don't know, like Taniguchi's alignment settings. And they were like night and day. Like it could be the same car, but completely different setup.
But even the way that the cars transition and everything, it was something that I could not drive the S14. Like I did not like driving that. Like Ben Schwartz drove it and he loved it. That's because he's really Japanese underneath.
Clearly.
But literally, like I couldn't drive it and I couldn't figure it out.
And
it bothered me that I couldn't figure it out.
And
then after sitting with Orido for a while, he explained it.
Okay.
And I'm like, okay. So now Daigo's car, like fast forward. Now we're at Daigo's car. It is identical to how Orido likes to drive his car, which is me, because I'm a crappy driver. When I get off the gas, I like the car transitioning and transferring over. Like I'll be full throttle and then get off the gas and transfer over. But if you're following somebody and you get off the gas, then it's going to try to straighten out. But their cars float. Like they follow really good. When you get off the gas, it's just holds it like, and it follows. And I'm like, wow, it's crazy. So the one time that I did get to drive Daigo's car, I'm like, oh, this is identical. Like I don't like it. But that's because I don't know how to drive. And then it's like, okay, now I understand why the high horsepower helps, of like, floating right next to the guy and be able to get on the thing and have the nitrous kick in, and it just pushes it right to the inside to actually get right next to him. I'm like, wow, this is crazy. And to me personally, I think that's how a lot of the US cars now are exactly are. Like you're on the throttle the whole time. You just stay on it, and it's gonna go. I mean, same thing. Like if you look at even handbrake, the way that they use the handbrake these days versus the way that the Japanese guys did the handbrake back then, it's identical. And I'm like, oh wow, this is crazy. It's like it's literally following suit, like for following. And it was just really nuts. And Daigo's car is perfect example of like, exactly what I learned from Orido's car and everybody else's car. I'm like, okay, I get it now. And now I know why he needs so much horsepower.
Right.
Like he needs the horsepower to push it to the inside more than anything else,
right.
or just, hold it out on the bank. What I mean? Like, but it was really weird because I think it took Orido and Daigo's car for me to realize like, wow, their setups are
interesting.
I get it. Like,
interesting.
It's beyond my level.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I get it.
Yeah.
Weird.
That's
it's really weird.
That's beyond my level too.
So. Oh yeah. No, it's. I mean, I don't even know how they set the cars up now. So yeah.
So no beef, really.
No, there's beef.
Okay. Well then, what the?
Okay, so this was the next year. Okay. So this was 2013 or
yep.
I think that was my last year with the team. Was 2013, and I think at this time the team ran like it meshed really well.
Yeah.
Everything ran perfect. But then they added a guy, and it was this guy from Seattle. And I didn't like the guy to begin with.
Yeah.
And so they added him. And the whole team was meshing really well.
Yeah.
But this guy wanted to be the Daigo sidekick.
Oh, okay.
And it's like, okay, so it was the guy that spoke Japanese and, whatever it was. So he broed out with that guy. And then now this guy became the guy that's like, oh, yeah, I'm going to be, working on Daigo's car.
Yeah.
Like, that's fine. I don't care. I got 3 cars I have to worry about now.
Yeah.
The Viper, the SE300, and then Daigo's car.
What Viper? Oh.
Dean's car. Because he traveled with us with the Viper at this time. So that was another car I had to build from 2012 to 2013.
Okay.
And so I built that one, and then now I had to follow 3 cars. But we got it down pretty good to the point where whenever something needed to be done, before they left or flew out or whatever it was like, okay, what do you want done? And wrote it down. And we'd fly out a week early and try to do what we can when it was on the East Coast to finish whatever it was.
Yep.
And then, it's pretty fucked up because they keep blaming on all this stuff, but it was the communication side of it. Like, you know what I mean? There was, oh, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. I'm like, all right, do it. Yeah. Whatever. And then we had an incident right before Texas. So I don't even know what event that was before that. But it needed to get dynoed because there was an ECU issue. So we converted to a AEM ECU on Daigo's car, which really sucks because he drove at the end of the year of 2012. Daigo drove Robbie's car. And then after he drove Robbie's car, he was like, oh my God. He's like, this car's awesome.
Yeah.
He's like, I like this car.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, okay. And left at whatever. He's like, he said Robbie's car made more bottom end power than his car. He's like, that's why I like this car.
Yeah.
But Robbie's car was so simple compared to, what Daigo's car did. His was extravagant, and it's like, okay. And then, so 2013 starts and it's like, oh, let me talk to the guys I know over at AEM. I was like, because you're saying that you wanted what Robbie had on his car, and he has an older AEM ECU. He's like, yeah, can you get me one of those? I'm like, yeah. So the guys that I know at AEM, I talked to them. I'm like, hey, I go, well, Daigo kind of wants to jump over to your guys' ECU. I just need a deal on a version 2. Yeah. I ain't asking for free. Just give me a deal. But because it was Daigo and he won the championship, it came down to we're like, oh, we'll give him our new one. The Infinity.
Because they wanted to say it was on the car.
Yeah. And they wanted to say it was on the car. And they're like, oh, we'll give him Infinity, blah, 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 and all this other stuff. And then it's like, I don't know how I'm going to do this. Because he just wanted, what Robbie's car had, which was the older ECU. Yeah. And then so I brought it up to Daigo. And I'm like, okay, they will give you this ECU for free. They will come and do support for free and everything. But it's the new ECU. It's not the old ECU. And he's like, oh, that's a good deal. Yeah, let's go with that. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
So we ended up doing it. And then all of us end up going to AEM, sitting down, talking and everything. And it's like, okay, but it's not made for this, the VVTi engine.
Yeah.
He's like, oh, no, we'll make it for the VVTi engine. And then Daigo's just like, oh, I don't want to be prototype on this thing. I'm like, well, dude, these guys are the ones that design it. It's like, yeah, let's just go with this. It's like, all right. So he said, okay. And we ended up going with that. But in the end, like, because it was never made for that engine or anything else, there are small ECU issues to the point where now it's my fault.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like, dude, I told you, like, this is what it was.
Yeah.
I would not do this unless you agreed upon it.
Yeah.
And he agreed upon it.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, you need to fix this and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, okay. And man, I feel so bad because, it's okay. So I'm going to bring up somebody that you guys know.
Okay.
Because he's competed Top Drift.
Yeah.
Or whatever it was called back then. Henry Shelley.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So Henry's at AM.
Okay.
Man, it was the worst thing ever calling him on a weekend on his day off.
Yeah.
Like, hey, I'm sorry. I need help with this thing.
Yeah.
No problem. And it was just like, it was the worst thing ever because we were friends before this whole thing.
Yeah.
And I had to call him, and then he would come on the weekends and sit there and like play with it. And, you know, tune it. It's like, okay, cool, we're good. And then sure enough, like Henry would travel with us to all the events too. And then come Seattle. Oh, that's what it was. It was Seattle. We had an issue, and then something was really wrong. Yeah. It's like, all right. Ended up, Daigo's back in Japan. We ended up bringing it over to HPS, to dyno.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't have anybody there to run the dyno. And I didn't know enough about the dyno, but Henry and a couple other people kind of knew about the dyno, but, everybody's dyno has a certain personality.
Yeah.
So we're like, oh, okay, well, I need you guys' help. Dynoed it. And then it's like, man, the dyno itself is getting really hot. I'm like, wow, this is weird. I never felt it like this. So the dyno had a problem and it shut down. But the way it shuts down is like, it tries to slow the car down, even in the middle of a pull.
Oh my God.
And so it's slowing it down
it's
to where the point where, to the point where like it turned the nitrous off because it's trying to pull it down so hard.
Yeah.
But the engine's saying like, no, I want to keep going.
Ooh.
So it's going, and all of a sudden the nitrous kicked back on, and then all of a sudden like the whole bottom end of the engine just boom, blew out.
Yeah.
And we're like, oh man, this.
My heart.
Yeah. It's like we got 2 weeks before this thing. No, we had 1 week before it had to ship to Texas.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
And I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to do this. And I can't speak Japanese.
Right.
So I got to call Daigo.
Yeah.
I'm going to call Daigo. And I don't know what time it was over there.
Yeah.
I called him. I'm like,
engine broke.
engine blow.
Oh.
And I was like, oh my God, this is going to be horrible.
Yeah.
So then literally I had to pull every industry string in the book to try to make this happen. And it was sleepless nights. So I was like, okay, we got lucky because he brought a stock motor over just as like, oh, hey, I want to sell these things. It's like, okay. So he had one of them at my shop.
Okay.
Nice.
It ended up being one of the engines that goes in his car.
Okay.
Nice.
But we're like, okay, let's see what we can salvage out of this engine, out of his race engine that we can put in there. So I call the guys at D Sport. I'm like, I need you to punch out this engine for these pistons. It's like, oh, okay, well, we could do it soon. I'm like, no, I need it like tomorrow.
Yeah.
Because I'm really good with D Sport.
Yeah.
It came down to that.
Yeah.
And then Brian Crowder is one of the sponsors for the internals. And I'm like, Brian, I need bearings like now. Yeah. And he's like, well, yeah. He's like, I can ship it up to you. I'm like, no, I'll send somebody down there. Yeah. Like, I need bearings. I need rods. I need this. I think it was like valve springs or something else. And then I was like, I need this stuff. I was like, I'm sending somebody down there like now. I go, dude, I need it now. I'm like, this is my favor. Right. And he's like, okay. Yeah, no problem.
Had you ever built an engine making that much horsepower at that point?
Yeah, but like, I mean, drag race engines.
Yeah.
Not really like that.
Right.
So I ended up, so I sent somebody down there to Brian's, and then he did that. And then, I mean, it was every string in the book that I had to pull just to get this thing going. And then, I don't know how much time we got because, like, literally, it's a crazy story. Okay, long story short. We started assembling it the Thursday. On a Thursday, it had to be on the trailer on Sunday,
dude.
And we just had the whole engine apart.
Yeah,
and we're like, oh man, we got to lap the valves. We got to do this. We got to do that. We started putting it together, and I felt better about it. And I was like, okay, cool. So start torquing the head studs down, and he has bigger head studs. And we don't know what the other engine builder in Japan did.
Yeah.
But it kept pulling the head studs out, and it kept ripping the threads out of the block.
Yeah.
On Thursday.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh man. And so we figured out what the Japanese guy did, because we dropped a bore scope in there. We're like, oh man, he's putting a helicoil in there.
Okay.
Like, we got to put a helicoil in there. But like, it's an American size, so we were lucky. But at the same time, like, it was, at this point, it was a Saturday, so everything was closed.
Oh my gosh.
Like, everything's closed. I was like, man. And I found one person that had it. We ended up putting the helicoils in there, and it stayed there. Like,
no sleep.
Yeah, no sleep.
Yeah.
And we threw this engine together and then put it on there. Put it together, threw it on the rig. No, the rig left on a Monday. Sorry. Left on a Monday. We threw everything together. We fired it up. It ran. We're like, oh my God. Okay, cool. I don't care. Just get it on the rig.
You didn't dyno it first?
No. We just got it on the rig and then called up the guys at AM. Hey, you guys are sending Henry out, right?
Okay.
He's like, yeah, Henry has another event. He's like, but we'll send somebody else out. I'm like, oh, okay. I don't care.
Yeah.
Like, you guys are sending somebody.
Yeah.
And so Gar gets out to Texas, and then all of a sudden he's like, Daigo shows up, because I haven't seen him this whole time. And then he's like, let's adjust the valves better. So we're sitting there sanding, like, the buckets in the trailer, and then put them back in. And then next thing you know, fastest speed ever, like at Texas. We're like, oh man, it's running strong. Fastest entry speed, like,
which was what?
I don't even remember.
Okay.
Like, come on, man. I was so I was half awake.
Yeah.
And it was both Robbie and Daigo were killing it.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, cool. I could rest.
Yeah.
And then literally, like, it just came down to where, like, he was doing good.
Yeah.
In qualifying, sure enough, the ECU glitches again.
Dang.
And then it messes up. Oh, no, not qualifying. Sorry. That was in the 32.
Okay.
I think it was a 32. Had a glitch, and then he's out. That's it.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh man. It's like, all right. And then right from there, it came down to where, like, this is your fault.
Yeah.
This is your fault. And
Your
I'm like,
fault.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, I did not say we're going to this ECU.
Yeah.
I gave you the choice.
Yeah.
Is this what you, oh yeah, that's cheap. That's good. I want that.
Yeah.
All right, cool. And then that was it. And at the same time, like, it's barking in Daigo's ear.
Yeah.
He's like, oh yeah, no, we're not going to do this anymore.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you know what? Fuck you and fuck you.
Yeah.
Like, I'm over this shit.
Yeah.
And then after that, I want to say it was, that was Irwindale.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of the sponsors that I brought on to Daigo and Robbie, I do a mass email blast, and I'm like, oh, you know what? I go, dude, I'm over it. Like, I don't say I'm over it. Sorry. Yeah. I said, hey, Irwindale is going to be my last event.
Yeah.
Blah, blah, blah. We'll do everything we can do to, win, blah, blah, blah. So then we had to convert everything back to, all his old setup. He's like, I want my old setup. I just want my old setup. Ugh. It's like, all right, put the old setup in, and I already knew this was going to be my last event. So I was like, I don't care. This is my last event. Yeah. Like, I want to go out strong. Yeah. And I'm going to win. And we got lucky because, of course, Daigo won. Yeah. And Robbie was, I think he was, no, he wasn't third. He was fourth. Mm-hmm. So he ended up fourth. But I was just like, I don't care. I'm just going to do whatever I can. Yeah. To make sure that this thing runs good. And then he had another issue at the car during the thing, and it would never do a good practice run. Yeah. Like, it just wouldn't go. So, oh wait, no, I'm sorry. I'm getting I'm getting my events mixed up. But yeah, he had a fuel pump problem or something like that. And then fix that. Sure enough, I think he qualified really good, and he ended up winning the event. Yeah. But at this point, he ended up second or third in the championship. Yeah. But had not that Texas thing happened, it should have just already been an easy win. Easy. Yeah. So it would have been back-to-back win. Yeah. And it wasn't. So, I mean, that's just kind of what happened. Yeah. So from there, I was always just like, Daigo, dude. Yeah. Like, I did everything I possibly could to make this happen. Yeah. And that was his choice on the ECU. Yeah. So I'm like, nah. screw this guy. I don't want anything to do with this guy.
Yeah.
And then like, so that was it. I just, anytime I had a chance, I'd talk shit about him. Like, I was like, oh, and then next thing I get DM from him. He's like, hey, are we okay?
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah. We're good.
Yeah.
And then from there, I just said like, you know what?
That's all it takes.
I don't care.
Yeah.
I just, don't ask me to work on a car.
Yeah.
But anytime you want to come hang out in my shop and drink beer.
Yeah.
No problem. Because like, he's like me. He loves drinking beer.
Yeah.
So ever since then, I was just like, oh yeah, you know what? Yeah, we're good. So.
What a story.
It's nuts.
Oh
but we had a lot of good times though. Like literally like the whole 2012 was like.
When you're winning, it's fun, though,
no, it's good.
Yeah.
But there was just too many people on.
Yeah.
Like I can't say on that team, but there were people on that team that just wanted, when things were winning, they wanted to claim it.
in. Yeah.
You know, when things were going bad, they were quick to point the finger.
Yeah.
And to me, I didn't care about any of that.
Yeah.
I wanted to win, and if we lost, I would come back trying that much harder to try and win.
Yeah.
But there's too many people that wanted to look like the hero.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And to me, I was just like, no, this is a team. You
Yeah.
know, like, so those guys that I tell you that I still talk to, like, even to this day, like if I have a project, I call them and they're there, you know, but it's just too many.
Yeah.
Like,
you win as a team and you lose
exactly.
as a team.
Exactly. But for some people on that team, it was not that.
Yeah.
It was like, point the finger when we lose.
Yeah.
You know, point at me when we're winning.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like they wanted, and it's just like, that's not how it works.
Yeah.
That's not how it works. Like we fall together, we joist together.
Right.
And it didn't work that way.
Yeah.
Like, and after that one, and it was some of the sponsors that I brought on too. That was actually kind of cool because the next year they were like, no, f*** them. Like, yes.
Nice. They followed you.
Mhm.
Oh my God.
Yeah, that was, I mean, I don't know. That just goes to show you that, you know what I mean? Like, if
The relationships are important.
the relationships
The
are
bridges are
important.
important.
Yeah.
For sure.
And I have a saying about that. And it's like, the bridges I burn lead to dead ends.
Mm.
So it's like, I don't mind burning bridges if I know it ain't going to go anywhere.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Oh man. Good. Oh my gosh.
Good
That's
story.
a good story. Look, thank you for sharing. Thanks for
Yeah.
being so
I mean,
candid too.
I had told you, I won't hide anything.
Yeah.
Like,
The
like literally, like,
stories.
it's, there's a lot of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
I know.
We're going to go into more of them because there's a lot of cool cars that you
don't mind.
Yeah. During the break, we were kind of talking about your time at the magazines as an editor.
Yeah. Mhm.
And there was an iconic car that was in option video, and it was the Blitz Autobahn project car. And they called it They called it the R34
Yeah. Mhm. Oh, 5 or is it 8?
I might be wrong.
Yeah, I think
but
it's R3.
I don't know what the numbers stand for.
R34-8, I think is what
Okay.
it was.
Do you know what they stand for?
Yeah, it was the mile an hour. I'm sorry, the kilometers an hour
Oh,
of light.
okay.
You know what I mean? Oh, yeah, we're going to hit this.
Yeah, so
But,
it was.
I mean,
it was
they
in.
really
It was in
aimed
the
for
option
that.
magazine. Blitz built an R34 for
Yep.
the purpose
Mhm.
of running at the German Autobahn,
Mm-hmm.
and you got to cover that.
Yep.
Tell us about that car, because you have some history with it. And
Yeah.
then also tell us about like covering that when they went to Germany.
Yeah, so that was a earlier story. In my earlier magazine days where I got to cover that car. So it was Blitz that actually they flew me out to Germany. And the whole thing was it's funny I say this because I work at a Porsche shop now.
Yeah.
But there's a roof Porsche.
Yes.
That was the goal that they were trying to beat.
Okay.
And it was a 911, and it was the whole thing of the fastest on the Autobahn.
Okay.
And this car held the record. So Blitz wanted to build this R34 that was, we're gonna beat the record.
Yeah.
And Option was there and everybody else, and I just got to travel with this car, and it was middle of the night going out in the Autobahn when nobody was running, just so that way these guys can blast this car, and testing and everything was like legit as far as for speed. Like they had a legitimate light meter that went on the thing that showed the speed and everything. So it was really cool because it came down to where I want to say they didn't break the record, but they came really close.
Yeah.
And the only thing that stopped them was blowing a power steering belt. Was it.
Okay.
But to see the car and to follow the car was just awesome because I followed it in Germany. I followed it Silver State Classic in Nevada.
Well, that's when Dai drove it, right?
Yeah. That's when he drove it. And then it's, to me, it's
Daijiro
probably...
Inada, by the way, from Option.
Oh, yeah.
Not Yoshihara.
Yeah. It was just one of those cars that was just like, to me, in as far as R34, it is the most iconic R34 there is. Like, I mean, it's one thing to boast, accolades and all that kind of stuff, but it was just that thing had it all. Yeah. Like, yeah, I got to drive it.
You got to drive it? What was that like driving it?
Well, I mean, it was really parking lot. So
it can park really fast.
Yeah. It was that. And then, but I did get a ride on it, right in it in the Autobahn. And that was ridiculous. Based off of the meter, I went 196 miles an hour.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
But
had you ever gone that fast
no,
before that?
No, never. And I would probably have to say the craziest thing about doing that was, like, I remember we pulled out of a rest stop and it still had all the test equipment on it. So we knew exactly how fast we really were going.
Right.
And then it was me and one of the mechanics. It was actually Nomikin's mechanic. Abe. Yeah.
Wow.
Abe. So like Abe was driving it. I was like, hey, let's go. And he's like, okay.
Yeah.
And it's like, all right. And we got lucky because it was still kind of late at night. And then we ended up going out on the Autobahn, and then he like literally floored it. And I would probably say to this day, it's like one of the cars where, like, you feel acceleration, so it throws you in the seat. Yeah. It was probably the hardest car that I felt as far as like coming back out of the seat while we're still accelerating. Yeah. So like, I mean, we're still a few seconds into it, and you figure like, okay, now like, do my makeup. I don't wear makeup, but you know what I mean? Like, you can do whatever you want once the thing's actually gone. But it was the only one that kind of threw me in my seat, and I'm like, oh man, this is crazy. Yeah. I can't get out of my seat. And then I just remember looking at the meter, and then it was whatever it was kilometers, and then I ended up calculating it, and then it was like 196 miles an hour. That's insane. It was funny because both me and Albe were really quiet, and then we're just like, and he gets off the gas, and we both look at each other, and we're like, because I guess he must have not ever gone that fast either. And then crazy. Both of us were like, whoa, that was crazy. Yeah. But it's one of those cars that I had the option to buy it. I feel so stupid for not buying it. Yeah. But, because to them, it's a marketing tool. That's all it is. Like, it's a write-off. Yeah. Like, but they offered it to me first, and then, I was just magazine guy, didn't make that much money, and I'm like, oh, I want it, but I can't afford it. Yeah. And then at the price that I got it at, it was just ridiculous. And dude, that was the car that I followed everywhere. Yeah. Like the team, everybody I know is just like literally like, even Mike Lau, like he's the one that runs, well, I don't know how you say it. He either runs or he owns Racing Beat now.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's his whole deal now. Okay. And so we were at the house barbecuing or at the beach barbecuing, and then that came up again. Yeah. It's like, man, I'm so mad I didn't buy that thing.
I know.
Yeah.
At least you can still look at it.
It's not the same. It's not the same.
Yeah.
It's still alive, though. That's good.
It's still alive. Yeah. It's still being preserved, right?
It's untouched is, I think, the best part
about it. Could be, like a lot of the Japanese cars, they just end up rotting in a field.
Yeah, yep, exactly.
So sad.
I mean, I own the RS-R 2000 now, and it's like...
That's right, you got it back.
Yeah, and it's exactly how it was. So it's...
What are your plans with that car?
Exactly how it is. Like as far, rebuild it to exactly how it was. Okay. Nothing modern, no LS, no any of that stuff. Like, I just want it for it changed my whole trajectory of life. Yeah, and not life, but career. Yeah, like I don't know.
Yeah.
I got lucky. I got that car back. So.
Speaking of that, like, you know, I want your take on, you know, builds today versus builds back in the S2K days. Like tell me about that. Like what you've seen.
It's way different. I mean, you guys know this. Like literally, like what you can compete with now. I mean, I'm sorry, before to now is just, it's just way different. Like, you know what I mean? Like you have to throw money at it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And to me, it's just, I get it, but at the same time, I wish it was like how it was before.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I mean, you guys heard me complain about the whole tube chassis and all the other stuff. Well, it's like, I just hope that drifting doesn't follow in that footprint where you can't tell what kind of car you're going to compete in because it just doesn't look like the same exact car. Like, that's the part that I don't like. You know, me, the speed and the power and the horsepower and everything they're running right now, I dig that.
Yeah.
But it's like, I guess that's what you got to do to compete. But I'm not a fan of it. But it's, I get it. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I guess you got sign of the times. You got to do it.
Yep.
But I like how simpler it was before.
I do too.
Yeah.
It was easier to wrap your head around things.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Now
I mean, now, and then you got to, for how much money they got to throw at it now. Like, it's crazy.
Yeah. It's hard to just buy something real cheap and just start driving it, right?
Yeah. I mean, again, that's a whole nother subject. Like, to me, like the younger generation needs to drive something that doesn't have horsepower.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I was lucky because when I got into it, I was spoiled. Like, I mean, I had Orido's car. I had like, you know, I had everybody's car that had horsepower. So I never learned how to drift weight transfer.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, that's something that today's drifters don't know is like, I was spoiled and I had horsepower and it was easy to drift.
Yeah.
But I'm a crappy driver.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? I relied on horsepower to get it to do what I needed it to do.
Mm-hmm.
And when that horsepower wasn't there, that was it.
Right.
So the younger generation now is they're all on horsepower. They do one lap and they say, change this, change that, blah, blah, blah. I need this, I need that. It's like, dude, you don't. Like, how about you do like 10, 20 laps and then see how it is then? You know what I mean? Like, get used to it. Don't come out of it one lap and then all of a sudden, like, that's it. Like, I was helping one of the kids that used to work for me, and he got into Top Drift, and then he was competing, and then I kept pounding that in his head, and he kind of got it, but he just wanted power because his skills got really good, so he needed horsepower.
Yeah.
And I helped him on one of the events. I was like, oh yeah, you know, I ain't doing anything. I'll go over there. And
Lucky
just
kid.
eavesdropping,
Yeah.
listening to everybody go,
Yeah.
do a lap, and then all of a sudden it's like, I need this, I need that, I need that. I'm like, dude, you did a lap.
Yeah.
Like, no, like, don't say you need this. You know what I mean? Like, you don't need this. You need skills.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, throw it around. You know what I mean? And that's the problem I see with like grassroots. Well, you can say grassroots, but I would probably say what's the level down from that? Pro spec?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the problem I see now.
Yeah.
Is like, I like the tire thing that they actually did to it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, it regulates it, but that's not going to stop somebody from like throwing a shitload of power at it anyways.
Yeah.
But that's one thing I probably would say I miss the most about, you know, how it was then.
Yeah.
Go in there and just drive.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, guess what? It's track day. You don't have spare parts.
Yeah.
Are you going to go home or are you going to drive?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's like, yeah.
Focus on the driving.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. That's the one side of it that I really miss.
Speaking of, I mean, we're kind of like comparing back in the day with today. You have a much broader perspective since you got into import racing so early in the early 90s, right? So that is, 30 years of just
thanks, Spencer.
observing. Yeah, my bad.
I'll do.
But like you got to see it from a perspective that a lot of us haven't, where, you know, it was so infant in its in its infancy.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
a terrible
Well,
sentence.
I mean,
but
that's why I like pitching what I pitch.
Yeah.
Because I kind of see where it goes.
yeah.
So,
So like where you've seen it progress to where it is now, what are some what are some observations from just like looking back on the 30 years of where it came from and where it is now?
Oh, wow. I would say like from how everything starts,
Yeah.
like whether it's import drag racing, drifting, rally, like you name it,
Yeah.
like it always starts with the grassroots side of it and then DIYs because nothing's available for it.
Yeah.
And then it expands to this thing of like companies jump in, they start making parts and they start doing everything, like to make it to where it's, order on Amazon.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it literally comes down to that.
Yeah.
And it's good, but it's bad.
Yeah.
Because it just, I don't know. I look at it where it's good because the access to whatever you need to do what you got to do is accessible. But at the same time, it doesn't focus on what you need to do to yourself.
Right.
So, I mean, it goes right back to what we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
It just has to come down to where like, you got to enjoy it and you got to enjoy it to the point where it's not about throwing the dollar at it.
Okay.
And that's, I mean, how it all progressed from import drag racing. It was like, oh yeah, give me nitrous. That's all I need. It's like, I got to go faster.
Yeah.
I need this. I need this. I need this. And then, it progresses and it's really cool to see stuff progress like that.
Right.
But at the same time, it's just like, it sucks to see focus being lost.
Do you have an opinion on, because you also witnessed a lot of street drag racing go into professional drag racing, and you saw professional drag racing hit its peak, and then it died down, and then drifting came along, and then drifting that happened with drifting. It didn't die off, but I mean, it came from the streets, became a professional national series, and has become really big. Do you see any pitfalls that drifting can learn from what happened with drag racing?
I don't know. Like I see Formula Drift doing, a really good job of keeping the cars still looking like cars. So as I said earlier, like, like it's about keeping the crowd still into the car that they believe in. You know what I mean? Like whatever car that is, they do a really good job of that. So you can't really harp on them from that. So I don't know, like from this point, like it seems like it's all right, but it's only a matter of time before it just gets out of reach because of money.
Yeah.
Like that's the only thing I can really see is just like, it comes to a point where like once money's gone, then they're going to jump to the next thing.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, that's a hard one. That's a hard one.
What do you think about EVs? We're
in drifting?
Well, I mean, we're talking about like fads and how technology changes, how culture changes, right? There's a big push from California's first is they're trying to make sure that a lot of manufacturers go to EV instead of gasoline powered cars. Yeah. Do you see a future in EVs kind of taking the baton and keeping racing going, or the love of motorsports? Okay, in racing, like, no. Like, I dig EVs, and I've built EVs. Yeah. Like, I have 2 EVs right now that I built. I like it. Like, to me, and I've driven a Tesla Plaid, and that thing is pretty ridiculous. Yeah. But, like, it's fast, and it's really cool. Like, I'm into it. But if you were to give me my choice, I'd rather have an engine that burns on methanol. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like I'd rather have something like that. Yeah. That I'm going to go race. Yeah. But I dig the fact that like, my gas mileage is good. And when I want to floor it, I can get to work faster. But if it comes to a racetrack, like I honestly don't believe it'll ever be as cool as a gasoline car. Okay. Like
I really think that. But for me, I dig one of the things that I'm trying to dabble in now is performance hybrids. So it's like your car is not a hybrid, like your S13, SR20. It's not a hybrid.
Right.
But what if you can adapt that hybrid technology onto that thing so you can have a little bit more extra horsepower, but I can still smell gasoline, or you know what I mean? Like have the, the regular gas powered engine. Like that part of it, I think is something that you're going to start seeing way more of, because I dig that part of it, but it's adapting the two.
Okay.
Like if I were to choose between one or the other, I would choose an EV if I had to go to work and then I wanted to floor it every now and then just for the acceleration.
Right.
But best of both worlds, I'd rather have a gasoline powered car with a performance hybrid on it that goes right between my transmission and my engine. And it's like, when I want an extra 200 horsepower.
Yeah. Kind of like a replacement for
exactly.
nitrous.
Yeah. Like I 100% believe in that. And I believe that that's the technology that's going to keep some of the gas powered cars going.
Okay.
But Toyota with their hydrogen stuff, I think that's going to be pretty badass. I think that's going to be cool.
That hasn't really caught on that much.
No, but you'll see it.
I hope so.
I personally believe the hydrogen side of it is going to be huge. I mean, Toyota's already been doing a whole thing with the semi trucks. The semi trucks that aren't allowed to come into California. Like they're literally like, putting their hybrid system on a semi-truck engine that is not allowed to come to California. Like, hey, guess what? It burns good and it has the power.
Yeah.
Like, let it back into California.
Yeah.
Like, I think the hybrid side of it's going to be really, the hydrogen side of it's going to be really cool.
That's dope.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I think it's just got a stigma, the hydrogen, hydrogen bomb.
Yeah. See, that's,
it's just,
yeah, you're always going to think that, though,
because
that's what they've been pounding in our head is like,
I know.
Oh, man, hydrogen bomb.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, you're always going to hear that, but dude, they got it controlled. Hydrogen fuel cell it's pretty safe.
Yeah.
Like, and guess what comes out of the tailpipe?
Water.
Exactly.
Love it.
Like, you can say EV is environmentally safe, but it ain't.
It's not.
You know what I mean? If you want to go environmentally safe, you're going to go hydrogen.
Yeah.
Like 100%. That's what it's going to be.
You guys heard that? Dang.
And you can do racing with hydrogen because it's still an internal combustion engine.
Right.
Like,
and
Toyota is going to release an LMP, like a Le Mans prototype car.
That runs
That's
on
hydrogen. So it's like,
it is.
They're trying to. I don't know.
There it is.
Yeah.
That's a rumor.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
I mean, rumor.
Mm-hmm.
So tell me, as we start to we're gonna end this pretty soon.
Mm-hmm.
I want to hear about you in cars today. Like, what are you doing right now? What's on the horizon? Tell me.
It's weird. It's completely opposite of everything we just talked about right now. So
it is not.
I work on older 911 air-cooled cars.
That's so cool.
With my good friend Len Higa,
Yeah.
who was at Apex.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so now he owns Sleeper Speed Shop. And we work on a lot of older air-cooleds, and we also work on water-cooleds. So that's kind of my new excitement because, I feel like, I'm not trying to sound like a god, but I know a lot about Hondas, and I love Hondas. And it's like, now it's like, oh, this Porsche thing. Like, let's try Porsches. So now I'm all like 100% into like, oh, wow, they haven't tried this yet on that. Like, let's try that. Like,
so you're intrigued.
That's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
And for me, like, if you're going to have a job, like, I could sit there and like, do cookie cutter shit all day long.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, I need something for
You
me
need creativity.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
you need a problem to solve.
Yeah. I need to be creative on something, and doing something different is to me what it is. That goes for racing. Look at it. I did drag racing.
Yeah.
Did the drift thing, did the rally car thing, like time attack, like you name it. Like it's just the next evolution of what I want to do. And I think that's what keeps me young.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You
look good.
You gotta learn.
Look the same.
Yeah, I know.
So you're doing the right thing. You're doing the right thing. He takes it. And what's in the future for you?
I can't talk about it right now, but
Dang,
there is something
come
coming.
on,
There
spill
is
the tea.
there
Don't
is
worry, by the
something on
time this
high
comes out,
horizon.
it'll already be out.
Yeah, so just tell us.
Just kidding.
No, I have something kind of on the horizon. So it's
Give me a hint. I always push.
I'm like I kind of pulled back on taking cars. I'm gonna start taking more cars.
You miss it.
I'm really lucky because I'm picky about what I get to take.
Yeah.
So right now, like I get a lot of offers for a lot of things, and lately it's been like YouTuber guys that want stuff built. So I'm like, yeah, and these guys got money. Like it's crazy.
Yeah,
it's YouTube
crazy.
money.
Yeah. So so like I've been building a lot of that stuff, but I'm lucky because I'm just picky about what it is. And but I don't know. I miss it, so I want to just take more race car stuff.
That's exciting.
So there'll be stuff coming up.
You miss the drifting cars?
Always. But like I do a lot of prospect cars still.
Okay.
Yeah. So I mean I can't say I do, but I do so many small parts for a lot of the I can't say a lot. Couple of the prospect guys. So they're always coming to me like, hey, I got this problem. Can you fix it? Yeah. Okay, cool. And I make them something. And then even some of the pro guys, like still some of the pro guys come to me.
Yeah. Who comes to you?
Now, pro guys, I'd probably say the only one that I'm really doing anything on is Dean Kearney's car. Okay. So he had issues and he's like, oh yeah, you think you might be able to fix it? I'm like, yeah, no problem. Yeah. And then so I've been working with his main mechanic, Dustin Hill. Okay. And he's a younger kid and he's a really smart kid. And he's been like, his shop isn't that far from me. Nice. So he's been bringing stuff over and it's like, oh yeah. He's like, I'm having a problem with this. Yeah. It's like, okay. And it's so funny that we talk about this because a lot of it is stuff that's just, we've been there and done that. Yeah. I was like, oh, you ever tried this? Already. Yeah. So it's like, all it is going right back to that side of it. It's like, we're having this issue with this. It's like,
well, kid, back in my day.
Yeah, you try this. It's like, oh, it's like, that's an IKEA formula thing. You know, like literally like.
Circa 2012.
Yeah. So with Dean, I'm just doing small stuff. That's it. And then, which is really funny because I actually did work with his team at Long Beach Formula Drift. Okay. Like he wanted me to travel with them the whole time. And I'm like, nah, I think I'm over traveling. Yeah. And he's like, Long Beach and Irwindale are like local. Yeah. I'm like, you know what? I don't mind trying to do it just to see if I can do it. Yeah. And so I ended up going and then I was like, yeah, I'll help. I was like, but I ain't gonna lie. I built your first car. Yeah. Like you're on your third car now, dude. Like I don't know anything about this car. Yeah. Other than the thing that I had to fix. I go, but I'll go. And then so, he covered me and then I ended up going and then like seeing how everything was running, I was just like, oh man, like we had time. So we sat down and I was like, hey, I'm telling you right now, dude, I feel so out of place right now. Yeah. Like culture shock. I get what is being done, but I didn't build this car, man. Yeah. Like I don't see that. I'm like, the guy you have on the car right now, I'm like, he has it. I don't know why you got me here, dude. Yeah. Like it's like he gets it. Yeah. It's
he's
like,
approved.
Yeah. I'm like, he gets it. You don't need me here, dude. Yeah. And then of course he was all like, so do you think you can go to Rondell?
Are you listening to me?
Yeah. I'm like, no way, I'm going to Sparkle Booth. I'm going to get drunk. And then Adam Napick and Andy Haley. Those are the only two other guys that I really do just small stuff for. Okay. But, like, yeah, that's it. Like, but I was watching Formula Drift Japan on the way here. So I still dig it. Yeah.
While you're driving?
Watching? No.
He's watching
I
while
was
he's driving.
I was listening, but the monitor happened to be up.
Oh my god!
But you're only watching it
your
at
lap?
a stoplight.
In your lap.
No, I still like watching it. I still dig it. I love everything about it. Yeah. And it's just like it's cool just to see some of the people that are still in it that that were there when we were there. Like that's crazy.
He loves drifting still.
Yeah. I do.
I love it.
We gotta go back to the track someday.
Oh man, let me finish the RS-R car.
Oh,
Yes.
I will be there when you bring that out.
Okay, now you got to drive it again because you drove the stock version.
Yeah, I know. I'm like way suckier now, so I'll probably still be like, I don't know what it's doing.
No, so like all the guys that actually like drift now,
Yeah,
like, you know, from the kid that worked with it, Sean Adriano.
Yeah.
Like now he works for Formula Drift now.
Mm-hmm.
But him and then like a bunch of other people. I always talk about the RS-R 2000.
Yeah.
And then, okay, when are you going to bring it out? I'm like, okay, but listen, it ain't like cars today.
Yeah.
Like, you know, it's different.
Yeah.
So you ain't driving this thing going like, oh man, this thing would get smoked by the cars today. It's
Yeah.
Like, it ain't like that.
Yeah.
Like I'm keeping this thing exactly how it is because it's what I remember.
Right.
I love that.
You know, that's,
As
I
you
guess you
should.
could say our golden years. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like it's the one that it changed my career.
Yeah.
Like it really did. So
I think it changed Alex's career, and it did a lot for RS-R, and
yeah, for sure.
I think it was the first car I can remember that came out of America that kind of set the bar for all drifting S2000s, and
It's funny you say that because there's a guy, I don't remember his name, but there's a guy in Texas that same thing. Like he's like, I idolize that car, blah, blah, blah. And then sure enough, he has one.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, that's so cool.
Yeah.
You know?
And how cool is it to see on the D1 video game?
Is it really?
Dude, did you not know that?
No. I didn't.
It's your car.
Is it really?
It
Is it
is.
really in there?
So the D1 video game came out, and they had a few American drivers on it, or a few American drivers and their cars. Alex Pfeiffer was one. Reese Millen was one.
Wait, what is this on though?
It's on PlayStation. I don't know. Was it on anything
PlayStation
else?
2.
PlayStation 2.
Tyler McQuarrie was in it.
Tyler McQuarrie and Ross Petty.
I don't know. I'm not a gamer, so
Yeah,
I've never.
it was
I
in
did
there.
not know that.
Now you
Like,
will
that's
be
so
because you
cool.
could drive
was
your
very
car.
Cool. Now
That's
you
very
gotta
cool.
check it out.
Yeah, I did not know that.
Yeah. The car you built.
I gotta get that now.
Yeah.
Just to have it.
Yeah,
You know?
go get an emulator. You can play it at home.
And then, screenshot it and be like, that's my car.
Yeah.
Right
It
there.
really is cool to see. Like, I mean, there's not a lot of them. It ain't like SR-teens where they're still out there.
Yeah.
A ton of them. But
Yeah.
like, there's like 2 of them I know of that, you know, they DM me all the time. Like,
Yeah.
oh, hey, that's my favorite car. And I'm like,
Yeah.
mine too.
Super iconic. Super iconic.
Yeah.
It's on the
Love it.
cover of Carboy. You remember that?
I think I do remember that one.
Yeah.
Yeah. I do remember that one.
Yeah.
But it really is that car that, you know, I don't know. Like,
It's like the Blitz R34, the Autobahn project.
I wish I owned that one.
It's like the Apex FD.
what's crazy is that's a car that I almost owned.
Yep. Well, you
But-
got one of them at
You gotta
least.
cut a
2.
deal.
2, my CRX.
Oh,
yeah.
nice.
That's right.
Yeah, the
I
one.
remember.
The drag racing one.
Yeah. Mhm.
We gotta come by the shop and check it out.
It's taken apart.
Yeah.
Oh, which one? The RS-R car?
No, everything. Both.
So
of
the RS-R car is over at Sleepers.
them. Okay,
I heard it runs.
you heard.
Yeah. I did not try to fire it up.
Yeah.
Like it does not look good.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
I don't know.
I can't wait to see it, and I hope one day like it goes on display at the Peterson Museum or something. That'd be really cool.
I like to think of that car as one of those cars that
It's well deserved to be in there.
That is
We know a guy.
iconic enough.
We know a
So
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, crossing my fingers. Hopefully
Yeah.
it is.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Very good.
All right.
So we're gonna close this out.
Yeah.
It's a long interview, but it was full of great storytelling.
Mhm.
Thanks for driving up here right
Yeah.
before a hurricane. We gotta get you home, man.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, thanks for sharing all the memories from and your insight from like the early drag racing days.
Yeah.
Before there was battled imports and it was street
Mhm.
racing, and just like kind of taking us through your journey of like being involved with car culture, import car culture.
Yeah.
Like you've worked on a lot of iconic cars, and I think a lot of
Oh, we didn't even touch a base on a lot of drift
there's
cars.
so many more.
Yeah,
I mean, more drift cars, a lot of grip cars that we didn't even get into. Iconic ones like the Sea West S2000.
Yeah. That's another one that I almost bought.
Yeah. But thanks for your contribution. I think that
No problem.
I think that
you guys are like family. That's
Yeah.
why.
if you were around back in the day, Gary Castillo, but maybe the younger people these days don't.
Oh, they don't know me.
They don't, but they should know you.
Yeah,
Like you contribute a lot through the magazine, through working on all these cars. You have like so much experience, and I would love for one day for you to work on my car. I don't know what it would be, but
Gary's like, no thanks.
Yeah.
Nah.
Just an S13.
No, because it would be at the car show instead of the track.
No way! No way!
I'm just kidding.
Burn, that's you're getting mixed up with my car.
But we appreciate you for everything that you've done, and just being a cool OG who's willing to like pass the torch, pass the knowledge to everyone.
Thanks. I don't consider myself an OG,
but
I love sharing my old stories.
Yeah.
Like I love sharing my old stories.
Yeah, love it. So anyone who wants to visit Gary, he's at Sleepers.
They know where to find you.
Bring him some Heinekens.
Like, next thing you know, drift cars are gonna start showing up there.
That's right. Yeah. But thank you so much.
Yeah, for sure. It was always it's nice seeing you guys too.
Yeah.
It's been a while.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. We won't count the years.
But we got to go to the track together.
We got to go to the track.
Sure.
The last time we were at the track together was that balcony. Do you remember that? There was like a drifting pretty competition.
Oh yeah, I do remember that. You guys were selling cookies.
I'm sure we were. So no.
Oh, I remember a Camarillo one too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That was nuts.
That was nuts with the airplanes.
That place was crazy.
Yeah. The tarmac. That's interesting.
Off-roading.
Yeah. So anyway.
Good memories. Good
Thank you so much, man.
No problem.
Thank you, Gary.
For sure.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Salady Mania Podcast Season 2. Brought to you by Falken Tires. Produced by Benson Sue and Nadine Sue. Audio and video engineering by Mark Mondoy. Graphic design and motion graphics by Steve Nakamura. Got a question or comment for us? Call or text us on our hotline at 323-607-6075, and maybe you can be featured on a future episode. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to our podcast on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you download your podcasts.